Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the forum. I'm Bev Smith, the Senior Director, National Operations with the Regulatory Operations Group in Comcare, and I'm privileged to be your Master of Ceremony for today's event. The last forum of this kind was held in September last year. For those of you who attended, welcome back, and thank you for your ongoing input and support. I'm looking forward to building on the valuable insights and learnings from that forum and share an exciting program with you today. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are virtually meeting today. I'm speaking with you from Sydney, so I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I acknowledge the contribution they make to this nation, and I extend that respect to all Indigenous Australians and Torres Strait Islander people who are present. I'd also like to acknowledge the richness in diversity around the room today. We welcome representatives from a broad range of organisations in the transport and logistics industry, defence, other regulators, research and academics, not-for-profits and other organisations. Feel free to let us know in the chat function where you're dialing in from today. Throughout the session, we will be talking about topics relating to psychosocial risks and mental health. The panel discussion at the end of the forum will likely involve panellists sharing real-life experiences. These conversations may be sensitive in nature and can trigger emotions for some. The supports on the screen are available to you if needed. We'll also post the links in the chat now. Getting into the session, we have a great program lined up for you today. First, we have an opening from Justin Napier, General Manager of Comcare's Regulatory Operations Group. So without further delay, let's get this show on the road. Over to you, Justin.
Yeah, thanks, Bev. Thanks for your introduction, and welcome to everyone joining us today. So I'm in Canberra today, and I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past and present. So it's a pleasure to welcome you to the first of our Transport Network Forum events for 2023. Last year, we welcomed more than 100 participants to both our April and our September events. And we learned from a range of industry experts about innovations, research and best practice in the industry. We facilitated panel sessions on managing risk, body stressing and safety culture, and we shared learnings across the industry with the aim of improving work health and safety across the road transport industry. So thanks to you, those of you who've returned to join us for another session this year, and a particularly big welcome to those joining us for the first time. As Bev said, we've got a really good range of participants at the forum, including people from the road transport sector, WHS regulators, academics, people from local government, senior managers, HSRs and workers. And we continue to receive strong positive feedback from participants. And this has been measured by our post-event survey, which indicates that both the content and the delivery of information are well targeted and meeting your needs. So please do take the time at the end of the session to complete the short evaluation survey. I'd also like to pass my thanks on to the working group that's formed to help to bring these forums together. So a big thank you to Simon Skaslik from KNS, Rod Maul from Australia Post, Chris Wilkes from Linfox, and Dave Winfield and Matt Del Moro from DHL. We will continue to rely on the working group to guide the content and format of these sessions going forward. So I encourage you, anyone who might be interested in joining this group, to contact Comcare and we'll set you up for a future forum. So the working group operates on a rotating basis, and we welcome representatives from across the transport and logistics organisations if you want to be part of that session. And we think this is a really important way to run these forums, because as industry experts, you're best placed to understand and respond to health and safety issues that impact your workplaces. So I just want to take a moment to recognise the work of the road transport industry and acknowledge that the industry's been through some pretty challenging times in recent years. Some of these issues are identified by the working group, and I understand that you continue to respond to critical events, COVID, floods, fires and everything else that this great country throws at us. work demands and pressures, recruitment and retention issues, and occasional problems with facilities and infrastructure. And I understand that many of you have been impacted by these issues over an extended period of time, and this may present challenges at both a professional and occasionally at a personal level too. So I just want to acknowledge and recognise the hard work and commitment that you bring to the work that you do, and you keep the wheels of the country and the economy turning. So I just want to say thank you to you for your good work in that regard. So one of the purposes of the forum is to bring industry members together to discuss not only issues, but also solutions, to talk about the journey taken to get to that solution and the lessons that you've learned along the way. So I hope that today provides some practical insights and takeaways for you that will enable you to better respond to the challenges that are present in your workplaces. At the last session in September, we provided a quick overview of changes to the psychosocial risk legislative settings and amendments to the Commonwealth WHS regulations. So this, just to be clear, these changes that we've spoken about, and I'll update you a bit more shortly, apply to those of you who are in the Commonwealth WHS jurisdiction. So if you're not in the Commonwealth jurisdiction, I encourage you to go to Safe Work Australia's website or to contact your local state or territory WHS regulator for information that's relevant to you. So for those in the Commonwealth, on April 1 this year, the Commonwealth WHS regulations were amended to prescribe how PCBUs or employers must identify and manage psychosocial hazards that may create risks to psychological health and safety. So what does this mean for you? As employers, you must ensure, so far as reasonably practicable, that your workers and other persons are not exposed to risks to their psychological or physical health and safety. Safe Work Australia has published a model code of practice managing psychosocial hazards at work on their website, and there's a Commonwealth Code of Practice is under consideration, but in the meantime, we're encouraging you to refer to the Safe Work Australia Model Code, which can assist you to identify and manage those psychosocial hazards that might exist in your workplaces. So take the time, have a look at that code. There's 14 identified known psychosocial hazards. Consider whether they apply to the work that you do, and if so, you'll need to be assessing that risk appropriate to your work and putting in place controls to manage and mitigate and control those hazards in your workplaces. So one of the other issues that people will often asking us about is when do we notify Comcare, in our case, of a psychosocial incident, and what needs to be notified to the regulator. So the current notification requirements that have been in place since the Act came into effect in 2012 continue to apply, but we're anticipating there'll be changes to the notification provisions to more broadly capture psychosocial risk going forward. But at this stage, there are no changes to the incident notification requirements in the Comcare jurisdiction. We anticipate that a regulatory or regulation impact analysis will be prepared and released by Safe Work Australia for public consultation sometime this year. So we would encourage you to participate in the consultation process and to consider the impacts on your organisation and use this as an opportunity to provide feedback. Another question we've been asked is, how is Comcare going to regulate compliance with duties regarding psychosocial risks? So Comcare already expects duty holders to comply with duties regarding physical as well as psychosocial health and safety in the workplace, and we will continue to apply our compliance and enforcement policy to psychosocial risks as we do for physical hazards. And as mentioned at the last forum, Comcare has commenced a psychosocial pilot program, which is involving 3 PCBUs to understand whether the WHS management systems of those PCBUs are mature and effective when it comes to managing, identifying and managing psychosocial risk. An early theme we've noticed from the pilot is there's an issue around job or work demands and how that impacts on staff. So I encourage you to consider whether you are adequately assessing the risk of unreasonable job demands across your operations, and then put in place appropriate controls to manage that risk. So to today's session, we have a full agenda today, and we'll be hearing from Australia Post's Chief Medical Health Officer, and there'll be a case study from FedEx, a presentation from Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds, and wrapping up with a session involving some panelists who'll be talking about their experiences of unexpected and extreme events and the unanticipated impacts of those on the business. The panel will also delve into how workplaces are ensuring they remain resilient and adaptable in the face of change. So just a final word from me, the transport and logistics sector is critical to the national economy, and the health and safety of the workforce contributes significantly to the nation's productivity. So we do appreciate the important work that you do. Comcare remains committed to the work of this forum, and we're pleased to support this work as it provides an opportunity to showcase what's happening across the industry, and in so doing improve health and safety. So I thank you for taking the time to attend today. I hope you find it worthwhile and interesting, and I'll hand back to Bev.
Thank you, Justin. If you would like more information on the amendments to the Commonwealth Work Health and Safety Regulation, we will post a link in the chat now to a website which has more information. So now, rolling on, more about today's forum. In developing the agenda for today's forum, we considered your feedback from the last session in September during the live chat and post-event survey. We polled participants on what topics you would like to see at future forums. Some of the responses included mental health, prevention and early intervention, psychosocial risk management, and support and wellbeing initiatives and programs. To give us some insight into some of the approaches underway in the industry, participants indicated they wanted more case studies to learn from what others are doing and see what can be adapted into their own workplace. So first off, we have Simon Brown-Greaves from Australia Post. A bit about Simon. He has been a registered organisational psychologist for over 40 years and is currently the inaugural Chief Mental Health Officer at Australia Post. Prior to this, he was the CEO and founder of the FPG Group, a national consulting business. Early in his career, Simon spent the 80s in frontline roles with Victoria Police and Corrections Victoria. He is a one-eyed Essendon supporter with a lifelong passion for surfing. He's also a father to 2 adult boys, a stepdad to 3 fantastic grown-ups, and an emerging grandfather. So with those sort of credentials, I'd like to welcome Simon. Simon will deliver a short session on his role at Australia Post, their evolving approach to psychosocial risk and their mental health strategy and responding to major events and crises. We should have some time for questions, so please feel free to add them in the chat and then we'll go through them afterwards. So welcome, Simon. You're now in the driving seat.
Bev, thank you so much. And let me check that you can hear me okay. Just give me a bit of a shout out that you're hearing the audio all right. Excellent. Hands up. Thank you. And thank you for that kind introduction. I've probably alienated, what do they say, 17/18ths of the audience by acknowledging my Essendon allegiance. Apologies to all the others. I just love a good game of footy. I'm really pleased to be here. And let me just start with a couple of acknowledgements myself, and obviously very important. The first one is, can I add my voice to acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the lands upon which we meet. I'm coming to you from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation today. And can I also pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And to those of you, and hope there's a few in the audience today from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background in particular, welcome to you. The second acknowledgement I want to make, which I think is really important, I've been in this job at Australia Post now for coming up towards 9 months or so. So I'm very new in the landscape of an organisation that has been around for 200 years. So many of the topics and things I'm going to share with you today and hopefully engage in some discussion about this, because it is super interesting, says I as a newcomer to the business. I'm able to stand here and share with you these things with a team of people that are integrally related to the success of this strategy. So I'm going to quickly shout out to my team, who I think may well be online as part of the forum as well. So Fiona and Eliza, who have been working on the strategy well before my arrival. Can I thank you as well for the work you've done in getting this together? Really important. You mentioned Rod Moore before, and he is one of my close colleagues here at Australia Post. And one of the things I would acknowledge, which is a segue into what we're going to talk about today, is that really important interaction between psychological safety and physical safety. And there are days where Rod, in his role as the lead from a safety point of view, and myself from leading from a mental health point of view, we're almost codependent and able to share each other's thoughts and processes, which I think is a pretty good sign. All right. And please, as we're going, think of any questions at all that you might want to ask. This is a tale of two things. This is a tale of, I guess, a case study. And I heard, Bev, your point that the feedback from previous forums has been about the interest in case studies. So in one respect, Australia Post is a very interesting case study in, not just the transport issues we're talking about today, but the broader concept of a strategic approach to mental health, and also this psychosocial risk construct that is front and centre in today's conversation. So hopefully for all of you that are here on the screen today, you'll be able to take something away from a specific approach that Australia Post has taken to some of the risks that we'll flesh out now. But also that there's some general commentary that is useful around that broader importance of taking a strategic and contemporary approach to mental health and wellbeing in workplaces across the board. A couple of contextual things. Many of you may know this, but just in case you don't, it's probably worth commenting that, Australia Post is a large organisation, and the attributes of that large organisation are probably important to reflect on as we have this conversation. Firstly, we have 70,000 or so team members that are part of our workforce. Those people come in varying shapes and forms. We are a very diverse workforce. We have more than 80 nationalities of origin across our organisation. No surprise, we also have languages of all shapes and forms across the business. And there's a little note in there about, as we talk about strategy with a workforce of that nature, it is really important that we think about how we communicate with a diverse workforce, and we're able to make sure that people are aligned and understand what it is we're all about. The second sort of contextual variable is that Australia Post, I have learned, way beyond my own expectations, is a household brand. It is an essential service. It is an organisation that people choose to join because they, in many cases, value the work that Australia Post does in connecting communities and in being, I guess, a social and community player that has a really strong and important voice around not just mental health and wellbeing, but connecting people across this huge country of ours. It's one of the most recognisable brands. It has a trusted brand. And I think, again, a bit of a segue later to some of the psychosocial risk discussion. One of our important platforms is to make sure that our own team members and our people feel connected to that sense of purpose, and that we are applying those same approaches within our organisation as we do outside to our communities and the people that we serve. So it's a big organisation. Ipso facto, the range, extent and nature of the risks that we need to manage are broad and in and of themselves quite diverse. We are not one workforce. Within our workforce, we have obviously a significant proportion that work in transport, logistics and related areas. But we also have parts of our workforce that are very traditional white collar and work in support environments. So one of my first points that I want to make in terms of our approach is that there are both general and specific types of risks that we need to be thinking about across the board. So if you work in transport, you will have, as we will see in a moment, some particular and specific risks associated with the work that you do, but you're still part of an organisation and there are other more general types of risks that also still apply. So, you know, a good strategy needs to be able to hopefully manage, mitigate and deal with all of those things. Okay, so I want to share with you a little bit about our case study, our approach and what has been an ongoing and evolving approach to the wellbeing of our people across the board for many years. This is not a new thing. And indeed, I would argue, this is probably also not a surprise to many, that the notions of psychosocial risk, prevention and mitigation and the like are not new concepts. We, in fact, are pleased and welcome the increased focus and the change in regulations, because we see that as actually reflecting not only good contemporary practice, but it's a helpful adjunct in terms of being able to really help our workforce understand the seriousness with which we need to take these risks and to manage them in a collaborative way. So if you look back perhaps at our more recent time, this graphic is a bit of an attempt to visually represent our process and our continuous improvement. I would also note perhaps a belated cautionary note here as well. It inevitably, in a discussion like this, involves discussion around issues and situations that have the potential to be triggering. I'm clearly, that is not the intent, but can I acknowledge that for many of you out there in this audience, some of the subject matter here is potentially of a triggering nature. And I know that we've provided some information about, you know, the way in which we can support people should you have any concerns. If you need to step out at any moment, of course, please do so. And to that point, just prior to 2018, one of the critical issues for Australia Post was the fact that in an organisation of our scale, we had to address issues around suicide and self-harm across our organisation. It is a real issue. We are representative of the broader community in many ways. So that issue in an organisation our size was critical. And there was a huge appetite across the leadership of Australia Post to mitigate, to manage, to reduce those the occurrence of self-harm and suicide-related issues. And in my view, that has been one of the really important success points. So back in 2018, we started to really put together a mental health and wellbeing strategy that we think reflected the changing nature of expectations of organisations around managing the psychosocial risks inherent in the work that we do, but also taking a broader, efficient and practical approach to supporting people. And a little note in the background here is that I find sometimes that discussion about psychosocial risk and mitigation starts to sound a bit engineering, and that's fine. And I really want to reinforce through all of this that we are also constantly reminding ourselves and our people that sitting behind every one of those risks or sitting around the specific factors that we're talking about are people, and people who bring their whole person to work and have all of the other human elements and factors that are absolutely critical. And I think so far we're doing a pretty good job of balancing that sort of more very hard-edged engineering approach to risk and managing mental health and wellbeing, with recognition that people are people, and you know we have a diverse group of people across our business. One of the things you'll see in this slide is also the fact that we are very much dependent and interested in our stakeholders and partners that need to help us. You might have gathered in my earlier introductory remarks, we have a relatively small team of people within Australia Post whose primary responsibility is around mental health and wellbeing. One of my family members, when they heard I'd taken the role, asked me a question about how the hell I was going to get around and take my inflatable couch and be a counsellor to 70,000 people. And, you know, the notion of our small team being able to be a very hands-on or responsive part of the service is obviously not practical. So we are highly dependent on our partners and an efficient way of delivering a really contemporary mental health strategy. So amongst others, we work closely with Beyond Blue. One organisation that will be familiar to you all is around Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds, and we partner very closely with them. Are You OK? And a big nod and a shout out to our long-term partner in terms of employee assistance support, Converge International. I will, if we get time, also talk to the notion of employee assistance programs and the evolving way in which I think we reasonably expect more from those types of responsive services. And I think we've certainly seen in the 5 or 6 years that this chart represents a substantial uplift in the way in which we're able to work with and partner with our employee assistance program. If we fast forward now to a couple of the points there, which I'll come back to in more detail, and I apologise for some of the acronyms, but PSWGs are a very important part of our strategy. So you've probably gathered that the underlying principle that I will talk to more later is that for us to deliver our strategy, we need to do it through the business and in partnership with our people, in particular, our leaders. And so it'll be no surprise to you that a key part of our mental health strategy at Post is about the education and building the confidence and capability of our line managers and supervisors to support the strategy. But we've also embedded a group of PSWGs, Psychological Safety Working Groups. These are, at the moment, 8 groups around the business that are our arms and legs, our tentacles, if you like, of the mental health strategy. They are based in business units, they're based in different parts of the business, and what they do is form a conduit for the strategy to move out into the business. More on them later if we get time. And you can see then in 2022, Australia Post and its new Chief Executive, Paul Graham, decided that they would elevate the strategy, the role, the observed importance of mental health by appointing a Chief Mental Health Officer to the business. This is one of a few roles of this nature at the moment across Australia, and there are more emerging, which I think is fantastic. And towards the end of this discussion, I'll talk a little bit about that role and what it's all about. All right, so that's been our journey. We recently presented a refreshed mental health strategy to the board of Australia Post, and that was adopted and accepted at the end of last year, and we are now in implementation phase. So one of the really important things is to talk about, and this picture on the screen will look familiar to many of you, and I just want to highlight some of the elements of the strategy. We are all about making sure that our strategy is focused on the actual and foreseeable psychosocial risks that are inherent in the nature of the work that we do across our business. We also want to make sure that when we're thinking about mitigation or solutions or ways of responding and mitigating those risks, that we are looking at good contemporary practice that is evidence-based and really gives us the best possible return in an environment that, you know, has substantial scale. I won't necessarily talk to all of these points in detail now, but it's probably a picture that many of you will look at and go, you have something similar in your organisation. At the core of it is the notion that we want to think about our strategy in the context of the extended workforce. And when Post talks about extended workforce, it means not only people that are directly employed within our business, but also our large pool of contractors and people that are dependent upon Australia Post, but maybe in some cases running their own small business and be contracted to Australia Post. No surprises, that is a large part of our business. We also, by the way, have a large network of retail outlets, over 4,000 of those, and I know that's not the focus of today, but you can all imagine that the risk profile for that group is in and of itself a little different from the transport side of the business, albeit that the underlying risks are in common, but some of the specific ones, for example, around customer aggression or customer interaction, is specific to the particular environment. Our focus, if I had to talk about the strategy and where it is mainly focused, it is across the following things. Now, the slide's a little bit busy, but let me just quickly share with you the planks, the pillars of the mental health strategy. Number one, let's make sure that we identify and control the particular and specific, as well as the general risks that are inherent to the work that we do across Australia Post. Now, I've already commented on the fact that that's going to be different depending on which part of the business you are working in, as well as having some shared and underlying types of psychosocial risks that apply across the whole business. A good example of that might well be bullying and harassment, respect in the workplace, and the like. Those risks are relevant and apply regardless of what business unit you're in. We're today with a particular focus, of course, on the transport part of our business, which has those common risks, but has a range of other risks. And just as a precursor, can I quickly flag what some of those risks are from an Australia Post perspective? Number one, fatigue. Number two, isolation and connection. Typically in our parts of the transport part of the business, we have people who operate in very often isolated ways of working, are out on the road for substantial parts of their day, and may only be in contact with their business at the start of our business at the start and finish of the shift. So the notion of isolation and connection is a key underlying risk that we need to be able to manage. Also in our transport business, we have identified the fact that general physical health and well-being is a contributing and important risk factor to the mental health of our people. I hate to be trite, but the notion of, healthy body, healthy mind is absolutely relevant in this workforce. You'll probably hear from Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds later on about one of their focus areas, which is all about trying to improve the dietary and physical health of transport industry participants. And that in turn is a factor that we think is quite relevant to the mental health and wellbeing of our people. The other factor from a psychosocial risk, and a very foreseeable one in our industry, sadly, is the notion of critical incident and critical events that could span anything from organisational critical events. Someone mentioned this already in today's discussion. For example, Australia Post had a significant role to play in floods and bushfires, and I'll talk more about that later. And it's important to note that for our workforce, their participation in those types of large-scale critical events is not only often as a participant, that is, someone who themselves may be affected by the disaster or the major event, but also the requirement to then provide service, often essential and necessary services, in the context of being impacted themselves. So I won't say that it's unique, but it certainly presents a range of potential risks and challenges. And we certainly know we have a multitude of case studies of our team members who have worked in providing support to the public, going above and beyond in terms of responding to major events, whilst themselves being impacted and affected by the event. At a more micro level, I just want to call out a couple of other quick things. Clearly, critical incidents also apply at the other end of the spectrum to individual incidents, accidents, and the like. No surprise in a business of our size, an area that Rod, my colleague, is very focused on. We also have risks associated with being out on the road, whether it's our posties, our delivery teams, and there are risks associated with that. And a key psychosocial risk associated with those potential physical injuries is the secondary impact and the effect that it has on our workforce when they are injured in terms of being able to manage the corollaries, the psychological flow-on effects. Very important to us and one that we're very actively involved in. So that gives you a quick snapshot of the sorts of psychosocial risk factors that we are focused on in terms of our strategy. Point 2, our strategy hinges on the necessary idea that we must and need to build capability across the organisation. Now, that capability, if I can be as succinct as possible, is the capability not just in mental health, but the capability of our people to be confident to manage their teams and to lead through all of the risk factors that I've just talked about. So we have a fairly important part of our mental health strategy is about building capability and confidence of people leaders. That is not about, by the way, sheep dipping our leaders in programs like mental health first aid. It is more about making sure that they are first and foremost confident, competent and capable supervisors. Those of you familiar with the Guarding Minds at Work risk approach out of Canada, which is one I often see around organisations, including Australia Post, we know that all of that material points to the importance of the relationship between our people and their line supervisor is absolutely critical to the mental health and wellbeing. It's a proactive and preventative factor, but it is also critically relevant in the event of incidents or serious crisis. These are probably less interesting for today, but very important for us is the really important issue of being able to measure the impact of our mitigation strategies, being able to understand that, is our strategy actually having an effect? Is it driving the right sorts of behaviours? Is it leading to the right outcomes? And one of the things that we're focused on at the moment is developing a enterprise-wide mental health and wellbeing metric that will be able to give us a snapshot and a hopefully easy to understand and practical measure that tells us how we're tracking in relation to our strategic approach. All the other things, I guess, you would understandably predict that also we want to be able to provide great support across the business when people are confronted by or dealing with mental health related issues from a both preventative and a responsive perspective. All right, I hope that makes sense. Now, a lot of this obviously hinges on being able to work across the business to help people understand what actually is a psychosocial risk, and a subset of that relates to, and what are the specific psychosocial risks associated with the transport part of our business. I've probably made this comment a few times already, so I don't want to sound like a broken record. But whether you work in transport or not, many of the psychosocial risks associated with, as you can see on this chart, unreasonable work demands. And I think Justin made the comment earlier about the importance of always including in your mental health strategy work a focus on job demands, work demands, with a weather eye to not just the physical demands of a role, but also the potential psychological effects. At Australia Post at the moment, I'm sure this would be no surprise to many of you in the room, we're going through a process of change, transformation in all parts of our business to adapt to the changing world in which we work. We have a changing profile in terms of our work, which, by the way, is directly relevant to the transport part of our business. We're in an environment at the moment where our traditional letter businesses are reducing in volume, but our parcel work is dramatically increasing. Flow-on effects to the job demands and the expectations of our logistics and transport and frontline people. So all of these standard psychosocial risk factors are part of our profile in terms of understanding the risks in the business. I'd call out, we are currently working through a substantial project looking at proactively thinking about respect in the workplace. And you can see there the psychosocial risk associated with bullying and harassment. The transport sector is no different from any other part of our business in that that is another key focus of our business. Now, responding to major events and crises. We are evolving this as we go. And I just want to call out 3 or 4 things quickly because I'm well aware, and Bev, shout out if I'm getting close to running out of time. But, you know, we think long and hard about what it is that makes an organisation competent and effective in dealing with major events and crises. And, you know, whilst it's at one level very complicated, and of course all people interact with crises, critical incidents in variable ways, we place huge emphasis on line manager leadership capability and confidence so that many of the supports and the remedies are put in place at the local level with support and where necessary, coaching and a wraparound from subject matter experts, including mental health support. The second thing, which has probably become more and more prominent in my own career evolution, it's fair to say, if I think back to my early days as a clinician, my focus on good systems and processes was probably pretty marginal. The longer I'm working in this space, the realisation that a great strategy has to be underpinned by effective systems that people understand how to access and are user-friendly and able to be utilised in a practical way is absolutely critical. So at Post, we're investing a huge amount of effort on making sure that our systems of self-help, our systems of reporting, our systems of being able to escalate issues, get help, are as simple and as straightforward as possible. Fair to say, obviously, we always have more work to do in that space, but we also need to, focus on the continuous improvement in that space. I've already talked about the risk focus, but I just want to make one last comment that, you know, a lot of the time I find that we're talking in general terms about many of the risks, and I was with a group of frontline workers last night out at one of our plants, and I was really impressed by their ability quickly to go beyond the surface of a risk into what actually is the specific risk that we're trying to manage. If we lift the bonnet up on something like fatigue, if we just took fatigue, it's one thing to say, yeah, we got fatigue risk. It's a much more important thing to say, have we fully analysed and understood what the contributing factors are to fatigue management within our workplace? Issues around shift length, rotating shifts, the way in which we schedule work, the way in which we empower our transport workers, our drivers and our support teams to be able to manage their work demands in ways that enable, in turn, a risk such as fatigue to be managed. In other words, do we impose unreasonable expectations or demands? Again, I'm probably preaching to the converted, but the transport sector in general has long had issues managing that issue of workflow and enabling the workers to be able to have some control and influence over how they are able to deal with that particular risk. The other one I'd call out, of course, is that sadly in our space, the particular critical incidents, generally speaking, are pretty foreseeable. So we make sure we've got in place the ability to respond to road accidents, to collisions, to near misses, and to provide training at the front end to help make sure our people feel confident when they're out in the field, but also to make sure that we are able to respond quickly and in the right way if and when risks are realised. All right, I'm very conscious of probably coming to the end of my time here. The question was put to me about what is the role of a Chief Mental Health Officer and the office. And in simple terms, this is an evolving role. There are a number of the large banks who have similarly put in place Chief Mental Health Officers, and we are, I think, gradually building a better picture of what that might be. At Australia Post, I think we have a reasonable understanding of what that role could be and should be, and as you probably gathered, the appointment at Post has been at a senior leadership level, which does enable the role to have the ability to influence at all levels of the organisation and to have a voice that is taken seriously. And I'm pleased to say, so far, I'm finding that part of the role is alive and well. It is also a job that is about ensuring that our practice is contemporary, up-to-date, evidence-based, and that there's a voice in the business that is able to represent the appropriate ways of doing things. I don't need to talk to this audience about the mental health industry more broadly is a very complex one, full of trips and traps for inexperienced players. I'm gobsmacked at the number of representations I get in my role, unsolicited requests for people to sell into Australia Post the latest fad or the latest methodology for managing mental health risk. And I'm not going to call any of those out in particular, just in case I might offend anyone in the room who thinks that equine therapy for senior leaders is a great mental health strategy. But we are really focused on guiding the business to the things that make the most difference and are defensible and are going to actually do what we want them to do. And that is create a workplace that is absolutely as safe as it can be, both physically and psychologically, and it really takes seriously the mental health and wellbeing of our people. I might leave it there for a moment, Bev. Have I come close to the end of my time there?
You have, Simon. So, look, thank you very much. Look, we do have one question. I am mindful of the time, but I think it would. I think the audience would be interested in understanding the answer to this question. Given you spoke about the size and the complexity of Australia's post business, the question we've got is how do you execute the implementation of the risk management across the organisation, and I suppose given the complexity of your organisation?
So it's a great question, and it would be front and centre. Our strategy includes a really focused mental health strategy, a communication strategy around this. So we use a range of methodologies to take our messaging out to the organisation, and that is a daily, weekly event where we're communicating about both the strategy itself and what the supports and mechanisms that are available. The second point goes back to the use of the psychological safety working groups and similar groups around the business, where we're embedding people with, I guess, an interest and a focus in mental health to take the messaging and the strategy into the workplaces around Australia Post. So we've got local champions, local people in the business. They could be supervisors, they could be long haul truckies, they could be people working in parcel facilities. But part of their role is to also disseminate and communicate about wellbeing and mental health across the business. We're piloting a peer support program in 2 parts of the business at the moment, and we will look to those activities to be cascading the messaging through the business. So it's got to be both a top-down, bottom-up, and dare I say it, for completeness, almost a 360 type of approach to communicating the message. So I hope that, and that is a really important part of our strategy as well.
No, look, thank you, Simon. And look, it was one of the things I was really interested in hearing how you've introduced those work groups specific to the management of psychological risk. And clearly, it's heartening from a regulator's perspective to hear that, you know, you don't view the management of psychological risks as a new concept, that you've been on a significant journey at least since 2018. And the fact that you recognise the partners, your workers and the leaders in your organisation as pivotal in the achievement of that strategy comes across quite strongly. So look,
Right.
thank you very much for sharing Australia Post's experience with us. And thank you. So I'll
You're
now
more than welcome.
introduce our next speaker. So we have Lachlan Spencer, who is the Stakeholder Engagement Manager at Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds. Lachlan's focus is to maximise engagement and alignment across the logistics sector and its support services to achieve optimum outcomes for all people across the industry. Before joining Healthy Heads, he worked in the forest harvesting, haulage and wood product sector. He brings vast experience in operations, corporate affairs and strategy. Today, Lachlan will share a progress update on the various programs and projects they have underway and the lessons learnt from those. Some of these include the Healthy Heads Roadshow, Are You OK in Trucks and Sheds, their nutrition program and training initiatives. So over to you now, Lachlan.
Hello, everyone. Pleased to see you. I think I have some slides coming. Maybe not. So I'd like to start by paying my respects to the traditional owners of the land, which are the Wurundjeri for where I am, from the Kulin Nation. So I'm going to talk today, and I know this is a follow-on from last year when Mel from Healthy Heads spoke. I'm going to build on what was said, and for people who are new, I'm just going to give you some broad background on Healthy Heads. I think you know, from Simon's presentation, which was fantastic, we can see where he's mentioned where we fit in, and I think it builds on how Healthy Heads aligns with a sector of the industry that's somewhat below where Australia Post sophistication. So Healthy Heads was created in 2020. We're a non-for-profit foundation supported by industry for industry to support mental health across the sector. Today, I'm going to touch on why we have Healthy Heads, our philosophy and approach, which underpins understanding what we do, touching briefly on the roadmap for mental health for the sector, and the resources and initiatives that Healthy Heads has to support you all. You know, I think we see these sorts of slides regularly, but it's useful to remind ourselves that the transport and logistics warehousing sector has a range of unique challenges. Simon touched on many of them. That places us in this first of the 19 out of 19 is a wellbeing indicator survey that's happened each year under an organisation called Superfriend. And that we sit at the bottom. So, and a lot of that reflects the challenges of what we do, but also our approach to it. And that, you know, nearly half of our sector have had mental health issues in the past 12 months. This is really a call to arms that was taken up but to create Healthy Heads, but also, you know, with Simon also touched on, you know, the employee obligations. Mental health is a part of general health. We would say the obligations have always been there, but, you know, with the recent codes of conduct and whatnot, they're certainly addressing psychosocial hazards has become a stronger theme. And this leads to the vision of Healthy Heads, that, you know, that we have a psychologically safe and healthy and thriving work environment for all. I think that's interesting that we start by saying psychosocial hazard and psychologically safe. If we think back even just years, we wouldn't have even known what those words meant. Yet now we're talking about this in our regular conversation. That's a part of what all of us are doing to understand that workplace stress can lead to workplace harm, and that's really important. Just again, as I touched through the introductions of Healthy Heads, that we are an industry created organisation that's supported by industry. We do have support from government, but primarily we're supported by our members who make contributions large and small, and that they enable us to freely give our support to anyone and everyone who wishes to use it. This is not a sales pitch, but it's important to acknowledge that this is an industry initiative. And similarly, our board has a strong industry presence. Our chairman is the head of Australia Post, and that we come across the not just road transport, but road transport, warehousing, and logistics sector. Coming to the end of our introductions, we have a team of 4, which is that 4 very capable people for 450,000 road transport, warehousing and logistic workers. So obviously there's a huge task to use, I mean, touching again on what Simon spoke of, leveraging our partnerships, but also enabling. We're all about enabling organisations so that they can be the multiplier. We're not a hands-on organisation across all of those people. We're not counsellors, but we're doing good work to ensure that what we have is accessible to all. That leads to our approach, that we collaborate with our partners, be that industry partners or those within the health sector, to multiply our value. We're also, I guess, really about trying to decipher into a language that the businesses and the workers within those businesses can use, and that how do we take terms like psychosocial hazard and communicate it as workplace stress, if that's how people understand it. As I touched on before, one of our approaches is that everything we produce is free for all. Again, touching on where Simon started, but I think this is a really important part of our conversation, is that Healthy Heads recognises that mental health is a continuum from thriving to unwell, and that the connotations of the term mental health often take us all to the unwell end of the spectrum, and we know the significance of that. However, we are strongly advocates about that how we keep people thriving, and that mental health is a part of all of us every day, rather than that conversation where mental health is only for those who are diagnosed, or only of those who are challenged. All of us need to consider our mental health and how we can improve it every day. And as we touch on the well-being, and this is the work we do. One of the most important messages to make it relevant to all is that we all have mental health every day. And the focus of our organisation, therefore, is about awareness, raising the issues of mental health, destigmatising the challenges with it. The second pillar, which is the most fundamental of what we do, is about providing resources that relate to the industry, and are relatable to those within the industry, so they can build mental health action plans and activities so it becomes a part of their culture. And lastly, advocating within the industry from the perspective of mental health, be that across workflow, be that the way, simple things like truck stops and whatnot, of how that can impact those who are challenged. So that leads us to, well, what do we deliver as an organisation? That in 2020, when we were created, the first step was to work with industry and with the mental health community to develop a roadmap specific to road transport, warehousing, and logistics, considering the risk factors, overlaying it over best practice, and creating a roadmap with actions that we can all align behind to address mental health. Taking from that, and this is where we step off from where we presented last year, is So the roadmap is a high-level strategy. We then underpin it with a guideline which goes to organisational leaders and individual actions. And what we're currently working on is taking that to a practical toolkit that really lays out what we can do. And I think fundamentally, Healthy Heads, this explains where we are at, which is many of the people we engage with are overwhelmed almost immediately with the information that's provided. And that if our philosophy is the first step is the most important and a simple step is a significant step, starting a conversation and engaging with mental health, overwhelming our organisations, businesses and individuals is really challenging for us to move the dial. So we at Healthy Heads are going to work with our stakeholders, and we have people who are giving us feedback at everything we produce to try and make it align with the smallest business, the medium-sized business, and the largest business in the complexity that Simon has just discussed. Examples of this, toolbox talks out of the box, where individual or team leaders are given a script, a poster, a topic to discuss, how to break the ice on mental health. These are really simple tools, but really effective for that we have found for people to engage on a topic they aren't confident. Multilingual resources, which are videos in up to 8 languages about what is this discussion about mental health, because we know across the industry that depending on where they are, many of the workforces have diverse workforces, and that many of those diverse workforces may not approach mental health in the same way. Handbooks which give practical tips of how an individual might act about mental health. And where we've been working most recently is to say building capabilities. Again, Simon touched on that we have worked with training providers to have a suite of training courses that cover from simple introduction to more complex topics, but tailored to the industry. So examples are industry-based and therefore engage with the participants. We don't deliver the training, but through our website, we direct towards these courses which have been aligned with the industry. Touched on before. Also, I guess Healthy Heads is about taking a different angle on issues. Well-being for us relates to the intersect between physical and mental health. Therefore, a lot of work has been gone with partnering BP about creating a healthy menu option for long-haul transport drivers. That's been effective, and to date, some 10,000 more healthy meals have been purchased on the transport routes. And when I say more healthy, we're not about going to that extreme of healthy meals, but meals that are bringing us, and again, this whole continuum philosophy of that improving on where we are is the improvement for all. We've done some work on fitness and with the St Kilda Football Club, and again, this is about healthy tips of how we can do practical exercises in the workplace that can address being more physically fit is good for our mental health. All of our resources are provided through our website and through our Healthy Head apps, which I encourage you to look at. A real focus of the first 2 years of Healthy Head has been on awareness, that our work in terms of building toolkits and resources has been underpinning that, and now is becoming more of a focus. But this first front end of that mental health is something that we can address and that we can overcome together, is something that is the core of what Healthy Heads does. It's 2 of our frontline approaches to this have been, we have a medium rigid truck, a DAF LF, that goes to work sites and to service centres to raise awareness about what Healthy Heads does, but also to acknowledge that workplace, that management are serious about mental health. And this, I guess the highlight for us all, and it doesn't have to be Healthy Heads, is having people in the worksite that aren't the management talking about mental health does create an environment, that safe space break some ice. And we at Healthy Heads about encouraging that first conversation, and the second and third and subsequent conversations are those within the workplace. Under a similar vein, but not so much delivered by Healthy Heads, is our partnership with Are You OK, where we provide workplaces with a kit, so they can have a breakfast, they can have a session. We've worked with them to get case studies that can be presented so that people can start to have a conversation about mental health. And I guess our message of this awareness is, it seems like a really small step, but it is a huge step for many. I'm only relatively recent with Healthy Heads, but every single one I've experienced examples where individuals have spoken about their own personal experience that they've never shared before at work. And that, breaking down that stigma, engaging with the issue, is the true pathway to addressing psychosocial safety. We've all heard about Are You OK Day. Our Are You OK in Trucks and Sheds Day is next week on the 16th. It's not too late. Have a look at our website. But having a session as small or as big is really about the practical ways of starting this journey. Also, forums like this and others about raising awareness and really encouraging people to take that first step. Who, I want to do something. I'm sort of overawed by the topic. I've read the code of practice and I'm not really sure where to go. Healthy Heads is spreading the message of that we're here for you in a way that you can consume. Our current priorities, noting the time, ongoing engagement, particularly through our roadshow, but also through Are You OK? Finalising our toolkit so that all size businesses can engage with the topic of mental health and wellbeing, increasing the uptake of resources. This is really the challenge of the number of businesses and the breadth of businesses, but providing them with, there is a way to incorporate mental health into your safety systems that is not overwhelming. And we continue to work on our diet program, particularly in warehouses across the country. I can't provide a presentation without being grateful to which I'm sure many of you are part of, these businesses who support us, big and small, from $1,000 upwards, enable us to do the work for everyone in the sector, and we're eternally grateful for that. And lastly, I guess it's a call to arms for all of us. Many of us might be a long way down this journey. Many of us may not be, but accessing resources on our website, have a look, see what you can garner from that. It may fit into your system, it may not. As simple as delivering a toolbox talk on a topic. Put some awareness materials around your business. I know these are the simple things, but we take this is the way we approached physical safety, and now we should need to approach mental safety in the same vein. Enroll in a training source, sign up for a newsletter, become a corporate partner, and that's, together we can create the psychological safe workplace. And really it's about, for us, fundamentally, it's how do we make people who are engaged, who are happy to be at work, who are thriving and being their best. These are all management ideals, but this is really, that's what mental health is delivering. It's good for the people in the industry. It's good for compliance, but it's also really good for business, because healthy, happy, engaged people are productive people. Thank you very much.
Look, thank you, Lachlan, for sharing those insights with it. I thought the comment that all have mental health every day, I think that's a really great way to sort of destigmatise mental health and raise awareness of it. The fact that, you spoke about resources that are relatable to the industry, and I think that's so important in terms of people actually being able to utilise the resources, and, that comment around, them being simple. So tools should be simple and engaging and not overwhelming if they're going to be used. I think that's really powerful. it's interesting that both in the Australia Post, because they picked up in their risks that physical well-being was very much interrelated to psychological, mental health, and that's something that you're focusing on as well. So it's clearly an area that's a very important risk to address in anybody's mental health strategy, ensuring that mental health. And you know, I grew up in the country, and I've actually seen some of the sort of the truck stops that they're now putting in for the long haul drivers and stuff in the little town I come from, and I think it's a great initiative and really important in terms of both their physical and mental health. So I really would like to thank you for sharing those insights today. And the other comment I would make is I think there's a definite AFL theme coming through the presentations today as well, both from yourself and Simon. So look, thank you very much. Next on our agenda, we'll be hearing from Sarang Gadre, Senior HSE DG Specialist with FedEx Australia. Sarang has worked in the exploration and mining industry before moving into transport and logistics. He is passionate about safe work practices, and thus it was a natural transition to move to the FedEx safety team in 2019. Sarang looks after the Western cluster comprising of South Australia, Western Australia and the Northern Territory. Sarang is presenting to us from South Australia today, and we'll be hearing about the journey FedEx underwent in designing and developing their new facility. He'll also be sharing with us a better practice example of an organisation adapting their design to enable them to cope with the challenges presented by growth within the industry while minimising work health and safety risks. Just a reminder, if you've got questions, add them to the chat. You've got a great opportunity to ask people who are working in the industry how they're managing these things and getting first-hand experiences. So I'd really encourage you to use the chat. Okay, I will hand over to Sarang. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I look after the Western cluster as you introduced, and went through a massive journey with FedEx where I was a part of a pre-transition team looking into everything from buying land, where it needs to be and whatnot that comes along with the challenges of shifting into a bigger facility. So I will share my slides. Please let me know if you can see them. Thank you. Okay, so we will go through this safety and design process and implementation while we were building a build-to-suit facility in Netley, South Australia. Okay, some of the principles that we took in hand with the safety and design concept and ideology, where safety is above every aspect of the business. Safety is thought about first and not the last thing, where they forget to invite safety professionals to the table saying, oh, we are investing more than $50 million and this is the plan. Do you see any problems? Reversing that, what we thought, let's bring safety as part of this project from the get-go, from planning stage to implementation stage. So the key holders in this project for this build-to-suit facility were safety and well-being, not just safety, because in FedEx we have a different well-being team. Planning and engineering, who obviously go ahead and look after all of these projects from the get-go, and operations and fleet, where we are putting out, just if you look at South Australia, more than 150 assets in all shapes and sizes on a regular basis, every day, 5 days a week. Our biggest challenge in this aspect was to incorporate 4 different locations in South Australia into one super hub. So PUD stands for pickup and delivery, then bulk pallet, bigger trucks, 16 pallet trucks, and that was a different warehouse. Pickup and delivery was a different warehouse. Then we had a special warehousing facility and a gateway and operations facility. The gateway is where all international parcels go through. They get scanned, like they get scanned at the airport. They go through this facility called gateway, and that's when they get on a plane. Everything is sealed. So that was a special facility. Bringing all of these together was a unique challenge in itself. We implemented the QDM or ABLE process, where we have assess, build, launch, and evaluate phase. And a big project was run to understand what are the risks, what are the hazards, what sort of challenges we're going to get, what sort of design is going to work, where all we need to make improvements. We visited different facilities within FedEx all over Australia. So other super hubs who are already in play, because in South Australia, we were not a super hub, so we didn't have any experience in regards to sortation systems or anything like that on a local basis. And we thought it was really imperative that health and safety and the operations managers do get across the new challenges that we're going to face with different equipment and different layouts and everything like that. So we have a documented IMS document, or we call it Incident Management System or Integrated Management System document, called Safety in Design, which pretty much incorporates a risk register, a punch list, and a commissioning sign-off, and just contractor SEQ management. Because though this was a site that, though this was a project that was built by a different contractor or a overseeing contractor, FedEx wanted to have ultimate say in how things are going. On top of all that, we are based on Adelaide Airport land, so we had to go by their environment requirements. So working with the Adelaide Airport environment team and understanding what their requirements are, especially when it comes to stormwater drains and the amount of stormwater that will go into the what do you call the stormwater leading to Adelaide Airport and everything like that had to be monitored. Fuel delivery, LPG, and all of these little bits and pieces that came along with it. Okay, we will quickly watch a video of how the facility is looking now and take it from there. Thank you. So we'll jump to some of the key implementations from the safety and design process. Now, I've distributed this into different sectors of the business. So if we look at office admin, the ship center, which is our customer service side of things, and security. Coming into this site, we got in new scanners, new freight scanners that do a lot of functions like route optimization, incident reporting, and what Simon mentioned before, isolation. So these scanners actually give us a good idea of where our drivers are, where our couriers are, what sort of runs they are doing, how much they have left on the delivery or pickup schedule, so we can give them some sort of help. Obviously, psychosocial risk is a big topic at the moment, and yeah, in that regard, these scanners help us a lot to give that visibility as to how a person is performing on a daily basis. And yeah, it gives supervisors and managers better accessibility to how things and how they can process their day. The facility has over 250 cameras and electric fencing for safety and security of our people. Also gives us a good visibility of what's happening and what sort of changes we need to bring in place. If we can watch a process happen and fine tune it by changing some aspects of it, these cameras are absolutely amazing. The special feature these cameras got is they actually track who and where and how they traveled, so we can see if people are not sticking to pedestrian walkways, then we can roll out pre-work briefings to help people understand their obligation from a safety perspective as well. Ergonomic work desks for all office staff, plus flexible workspaces. So all our desks have the facility to, you can arrange like you have in your car. So you sit down, you push a button and the desk can go up and down. If you feel like your back is hurting, you can stand up and work. If you feel your legs are hurting now by standing up for too long, you could sit down and work. You could adjust it to a height you like. So, and it's got memory functions and everything. People love it. Employees in the office are visibly more happy. There are breakout rooms. There are sofas where people can sit down, relax, and work whatever way they feel comfortable. A lot of focus is given on team morale and making employees feel proud that they work at FedEx. We organize a lot of functions. We organize a lot of Bravo Zulu awards for people who stand out when they during, so it could be customer service, could be safety in the workplace. People come up with great ideas. Health and safety representatives and all other couriers and handlers, they come up with a brilliant idea. They get rewarded, recognized. They feel proud. We do little small things. They don't have to be massive $1,000 prices, but coffees in winter. We do ice cream in summer, cascades and barbecues. So cascade is basically a quarterly meeting where the top management comes down to the grassroots levels and gives a overview of how the company is performing, in which direction we are moving, what sort of strategies we're going to implement going forward, and any changes that are coming within the organization. So this helps keep that transparency and and has helped us a lot. And we definitely keep looking forward to doing it. So some proud moment is the employee retention. We've got one employee here in our site in Netley that has been with us for 55 years. Now you see my background, it says 50 years of FedEx. So we used to be called TNT before, Thomas National Transport. FedEx bought us in 2016. So FedEx is only 50 years old, but this employee has been with us from the days of TNT, and he was retained and he's still going and happy. The only thing we did, considering that he's well in his 70s, like he works as a dock hand full-time with us instead of driving heavy vehicles out on the road. So that's just looking after these people. If you look at operations, so we have 3-meter exclusion zone on all our forklifts with laser lights projecting that in front. There's calibration templates next to the LPG forklift filling station where you can drive in and you can make sure we're still maintaining 3-meter exclusion zone. What we did while building this facility is we realized that the way we are located and most of our wind being on the eastern side of the Adelaide Airport, most of our wind and weather comes through the west. So we extended the awning sizes on the west side of the building so that people working along those side of the facility, get more protection from rain, especially and the sun. That helped us creating bigger, wider spaces for loading and unloading trailers. Hence, the people plant interaction has improved a lot from our other 4 facilities before. We do not allow any mobile phone usage on the floor. There are designated yellow cages, or booth boxes is what we call. If anybody wants to take a phone call, that's where they go, or they stand in a pedestrian walkway away from open roller doors and all, to make sure that they're not walking and talking. And believe me, most managers are the people who need to be reminded of this. Sometimes me too. In the heat of the moment, you are under the pump and you take the phone while you're walking, then our people are empowered to come and say, hey, buddy, you can't do that. You got to stand in one place and answer your call, which is fantastic that employees actually feel empowered to come and have a conversation with the senior manager and point it out that they're doing the wrong thing. I think the culture is pretty good. We have a custom-built remedial room for employees to use. Now, this is not a gym. It's not an F45 bodybuilding facility. This is more of a safe, fit, and strong program that we run 3 days a week. So Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, AM and PM shift. So PUD maybe in AM on a Monday, PM we would have the operations and distributed with bulk and all our little departments. So a physio is on site. He walks the floor. He has conversations with people. He helps them correct their posture, recommends exercises. If people have little niggles here and there, people come and have a conversation with them. They can book some time, and he can run them through what sort of exercises they need to do to get a stronger core, what sort of little bits and pieces they can do from a diet perspective, from eating healthy, and all those little bits and pieces that actually help people. This is a proven fact that having this sort of a program actually helps us with injuries, because people are already getting fitter. They're doing the right thing. Their postures are correct. So we are seeing less and less injury incidents with back injuries, especially from a body stressing perspective. We have a massive first aid room as well. We run flu programs on a yearly basis. So from a well-being perspective, we have, as you can see in the photo, we have dock levelers for each and every trailer unload. So there are cross dock levelers and mini dock levelers where the gap that effectively forms in between the dock and the trailer is eliminated by the dock leveler. So hence there's less injuries in that side as well. We were new to this facility and the sorter was new to us. So we had to go in and improvise a little bit in order to make sure that we put the right freight profile on the sorter. Because if we put something that shouldn't be there, there's a good chance it's going to roll or fall off. So there's a lot of training that went in place. We had consultations with HSRs and other members of the workforce to come in and experience how the sorter is going to go while it was getting built. We heard them. They provided some valuable suggestions in regards to signage and everything like that. That was immediately implemented and put out on the sorter so that people understand what can and cannot go, and stops us from injuries, accidents, or even cost resulting from massive damages and the downtime that operations would experience if the wrong freight profile went up a sorter. So we employed 2 train with 30 carriages, and anything that is not sortable is taken around with these trains, and I will see in a photo a little bit later as well. This is an extremely quiet sortation system. So the highest recorded was 79 decibels. The system is rated at between 75 and 80 decibels. So again, helps people. It's not massive. We used to have to wear earplugs at the news station. No one needs to wear them as well, so people are more comfortable with their work. When it came to pickup and delivery, some of the things we implemented were we realized that having same sort of concrete floor finishes wasn't ideal for each and every location. For example, places where forklifts and trucks and vans are going to operate, we do not want a polished floor, because come the wet season or the rainy season, and the water that gets dragged in with trucks and vans the floor becomes absolutely slippery. It is fantastic to keep that floor clean because it doesn't mark up with a forklift tires or anything like that, but it becomes a massive hazard during the rainy season. So those kind of floors where there's going to be traffic were burnished or brush finished, and the floors where packages were going to slide, where we see in this little photo here, were polished so that people can push heavier packages inside the truck, and it makes it easier on them. As I mentioned before, our operations office has screens that display asset locations, so we can go up on the screen and see each and every asset in Adelaide. We can see where they are, how they're performing, if they need any help. And as I think Simon mentioned before, that isolation and working alone component of freight delivery, unfortunately, we can't eliminate that, but this is one thing that helps us to know how and where our people are. So in case we need to provide help, we know exactly where to go, and it actually reduces stress on both the employee and the supervisors, and definitely has optimized productivity. All of our new employees and contractors have to undergo an induction, which includes traffic management plan, training courses, police checks, driving course, and a buddy system with our DECs before they can actually go out and perform for us. So on an average, it takes us close to 35 days before we have these people who are new to the industry or new to FedEx actually go out and start doing deliveries on their own. There is a program called Think Training, which we do with each and every person, irrespective of how much experience they have driving heavy vehicles. It's a full day training course. We don't teach them how to drive a vehicle, but we teach them what to look out for, and simple things like gold stickers on the side view mirrors, which says get out and look while reversing, because most of our incidents and accidents come, or 70% of them come through reversing. And if we can educate our people what to look for, look high and low and little bits and pieces from that training, it helps us save costs, and it helps us save, like the safety becomes paramount, not just for us, but for people and the general public as well. In order to make life easy and a little bit of less stress for our PUD drivers, who, as we know in this industry, they do a lot of pickups and deliveries. They do a lot of stops in a day. We give them a little box, as it's shown in this little picture here. It's got pretty much everything they need for the day. The driver picks it up in the morning. The scanner goes in there. They get a small printer. The printer can go in there. They are any other things that they need to do a successful job is in there, including some QR codes for incident reporting. If they have a vehicle accident, or if they're involved in a road rage sort of an incident, they can quickly scan, call the supervisor, let us know, take photos, and it helps us record all our injury incidents or vehicle incidents in perfect time. And it also has, in fact, we get notified straight away. I'm on a list of called a queue, what do you call it, a Teams group, where if it's a notifiable incident, I get notified immediately, and hence we haven't gone beyond 24 hours of notifying ComCare. If there was a notifiable incident within the Adelaide station, it gets notified immediately, and that's something which has helped us in the long run a lot. If you look here on the right-hand side, that's a 1-ton Mercedes Sprinter, and a massive clearance under the sortation system, so which is like 7 meters tall by 7 meters wide. No chance of hitting the sorter, or no chance of disrupting operations as well. And of course, safety is taken care of by the process of safety and design implementation. Okay, we understand that it's a massive site and it is spread out. And people are going to be working in different locations at different times. We have 7 defib locations, 16 first aid kits and IVAS stations in strategic locations across the site. The idea was to put these in such location that people do not have to walk more than 20-25 meters to get one. So the quicker they find one, the easier it is to treat your people and the lesser the problems. Another thing that came out of it is most people didn't know how to use an AED other than the people who were first aiders. So we implemented Red Cross training across the whole site, and each and every one who wanted to attend was more than welcome, but managers, supervisors, and first aid officers were definitely on the list. On the right-hand side, we can see a big bulk flow. From a safety and design perspective, we spent a lot of money in getting the massive beams in between. So the beam size went up. It's a massive roof, but the cost also went up a lot. But what it has effectively done is reduced all the hit points. So the lesser the vertical beams, the less people are going to reverse into or drive into, or forklifts going to have accident. And the lesser the blind spots, the more visible the space, the more safer we get. So that was the idea behind designing a floor that is wide open and with less blind spots. We also have a CO2 extractor fans fitted all over the bulk flow. So anytime it detects the CO2 levels are rising, especially when it's when the roller doors are down and it sees that CO2 levels are rising, this little box kicks in place, activates all of the fans, and fresh air is pumped in, and everyone's happy from there. So we are going to introduce a drive-through check vacuum. It's not in the picture at the moment, but it's currently getting worked on as we speak. So what it does is forklift picks up a pallet, drives through the laser beams, and it gets checked, weighed, and cubed, and goes straight onto a truck. So it reduces handling, reduces congestion, reduces people-plant interaction. So that is, again, another safety and design or a planning and engineering project along with safety, where consultation was done. People who actually work on a forklift were given a chance to come in and voice their concerns, provide suggestions. Everything was taken, a QDM group was formed, and then implemented. So that is going great. What we found is most of our first aid kits, unless they are highlighted bright and easily and located in strategic locations where people can see them, people tend to forget where they are. So we made sure that they have nice bright orange in partnership with ALSCO, of course, and put them in locations and where people can see them easily and make use of them when necessary. All of 150 assets that come in and out of this facility are maintained on site. There are 2 advantages to this. If there are any breakdowns, they get fixed immediately. And it reduces our downtime for an asset that sits idle, waiting to be fixed. Previously, when we had our 4 sites, 4 different sites, we did not have the capacity to actually fix our assets on site. They could do minor repairs and damages. But when we built this facility, we put in a overhead or a above ground diesel tank along with AdBlue, considering the environment. And the newer the assets come in, most of them have AdBlue in them. It helps reduce CO2 emissions from the diesel fuel. Next to that, which we have a truck wash. So each and every truck it's an automatic truck wash with a capability to do it manually as well, depending on if the machine is out of service. All you have to do is drive in. Anything from a van to a B-double can get washed in here. FedEx is big on brand value. We want to make sure that our trucks look clean and they're well maintained. So hence the investment that came into it. So with the on-site servicing came another aspect or another hazard called the pit. People should, this is a restricted entry area, but people are inquisitive. They walk through spaces they shouldn't be going through. So we came up with saying, how do we go ahead and make sure that when this is not in use, we do not have any accidents or incidents in this area. So again, during the design process, various tenders were floated, and the best one that came back with a automatic roller cover. So everything nowadays, people are lazy, right? Everything nowadays has to happen at a press of a button. So there you go. You press a button, it closes the pit and it secures it. So there's no chance of falling. To go more than that and to give those visuals to people to warn them, this pit is also treated like a live dockage. So it's got the yellow and red marking around it, another visible another visible aspect of you shouldn't be walking here. Please do not enter this area. We have a separate space for stocking any dangerous goods or any items that are hazardous. So anything that comes that is picked up by drivers going interstate or going on a plane or going for a local delivery has to go through a certain process. If there is no paperwork, there will not be any delivery or any pickup. So obviously there is a policy for that, but each and every package needs to go in a designated area so it is protected from impacts and spillages and any other hazards that come along with it. If there's a big spillage of maybe a sulfuric acid, then the whole site needs to be shut down. It's not good. People can inhale those fumes, and all of that has to go in a certain protected area where it is safe and does not get impacted. Okay. Considering the future, that there will be a lot of growth in the next 15 to 20 years, because what we saw during COVID is our freight volume went up by nearly 35%, and we were struggling to understand, or we were struggling to have space in the station for that. So when we designed this station, we made sure that we are building docks, floors, and hard stands that will withstand nearly 15 years of projected growth. At the back of the station, we also have a understanding with the Adelaide Airport that in future, if we need to expand, that land is kept available for us. So 30 years down the line, if we have business that is running like expanding even to the capacity of this current build-to-suit station, then we will have the capacity to expand. To give an idea, around 380 staff work at this new facility in Netley. Okay. All of our vehicles are fitted with telematics, and that is how we know who is where and doing what. From an environment perspective, at the moment, we have taken up a project where we look at the idle times and see how many people are sitting idle, and hopefully a bit of education and feedback from that system. During pre-work briefings and all, we will educate people to turn their vehicles off. Sometimes when it comes to vehicle incidents, we can also see the hard braking, hard acceleration kind of moves people make, or sharp cornering. We try and tailor that defensive driving training to that person and educate them as to how they can be more safe, how they can take more care of the vehicle, and in return, the vehicle takes care of you. The layout of the sortation system from the original design was changed to provide the ability to expand in future. So the original design's sortation facility control room was at the back of the station, which is pretty much where that little truck is coming in. What that was going to do is stop us from expanding in the future. So we shifted the whole control system to the middle of the station. And on the front of the station, we have the bulk area. It doesn't need a sorter. At the back, we have the pickup and delivery where the slides come down. All of these slides are designed so that people do not have to bend when they pick up a parcel. Everything comes at waist level, and they can pick it up from there and take it straight to their truck. So yes, it's unfortunately a manual handling job, but we can't get rid of it. But from what we had previously in our facilities, we've reduced our manual handling by close to 60% of it is completely eliminated. Double handling has been eliminated and saving people that valuable. Oops, sorry. There is a specially designed dojo area where we can demonstrate people how to do manual handlings, because people do a course online in FedEx Learning Center, but no one would actually show them how to do things unless they go in and someone spots that they are not picking up parcels correctly. So what we thought was we'll build a special area with a slide end with a little pallet jack with electric pallet jacks and forklifts, and show people how to do things and what good looks like and how we want them to follow. And again, it helps keep people safe. It helps from it pretty much practically reduces manual handling injuries as well. From an environment perspective, at the moment, the only best thing we could do was alter the roof structure a little bit to incorporate solar panels in the future. At the moment, it is unsustainable to have solar panels on the roof, because the cost of battery or storage is gigantic for a structure or a facility like this. And most of our electricity usage is say from 4 o'clock in the morning till 9 a.m. and then late in the evening. During the summer season, it is fantastic. We have sunlight till pretty much 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, but during winter, it provides us with no incentive to build. But considering that in future, solar panels and solar power generation is going to be the next norm, we've already incorporated structurally that it can take the solar panel weight as well. We are aiming to get electric forklifts by the end of FY23, by the end of, calendar year 23. And most of our forklifts, bar 3, that need to operate in the yard outside will be all electric. So that's again another step towards curbing CO2 emissions. Cleaning stations, which we found, I have a quality background, so I always look at things and try to improve processes and procedures. So we wanted to implement the 5S strategy, or the 6S with safety. I thought, okay, if we have a cleaning station and it's not labeled, it's not put up properly, it's not strategically located, people are going to become a bit lazy to pick up behind them. So all of our cleaning stations are numbered. All of our cleaning stations have a shadow board. If someone picks up something from a cleaning station or any place, it has to go back. The whole facility is line marked. The whole facility has boxes where bins need to go, where spill kits need to go. If someone moves anything, it is their duty to bring it back. And we review video footage, and we review things after an incident, and we brief people and educate them or condition them to do the right thing, because it's a big thing about changing. Like I always say, if we have the best systems in the world, from a compliance perspective, it is amazing, but you have to change people's behavior, and people's behavior change only comes by conditioning them to think the way you want them to think, the conditioning them to or empowering them to think, okay, this is why we do it, this is how it needs to be done, and this is where it needs to go. And if you give them that training, then most of them will definitely follow. Okay. That's pretty much it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarang. I found that really, really interesting, and it's so good to see how the process have been flipped, and safety obviously was at the forefront of design rather than an afterthought. I think what's also really powerful that came through in your presentation is it's not, it's not just about the physical aspects of what you've achieved there, but it is the cultural aspects. The experiences you shared shows that you've developed, quite a strong safety culture there that is obviously working very well with those designs that you've put in place. So there's been a lot of interest in the chat in terms of some of the things and initiatives you've done. So I'm sure that people will be reaching out to you. So thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, so now we're going to drive right into our panel session. Tom Dawson, South Australia Northern Territory Regional Director with their Regulatory Operations Group of Comcare, will be facilitating today's panel. I'll let Tom introduce our panel and today's topic for discussion.
Thanks, Bev, and good afternoon, everyone. And Bev, I'm picking up on all the transport and trucking connections you're doing in there. So
I
yeah,
did have some
thank you.
other jokes, but I decided not to share them. They were really a little bit too corny. So.
Oh, we love corny. So yeah, afternoon, everyone. Tom Dawson here. I'm excited to welcome our panel of industry representatives today to discuss the impacts of unexpected and extreme events. So they'll be talking to us from 3 different roles, 3 different perspectives, and from 3 different companies within our jurisdiction. So I'm very grateful to them for giving up their time and to share their experiences, and also to their organisations too. So firstly, we've got Mark Inman. So Mark is a interstate truck driver. Mark drives a B-double, and he's a driver based in South Australia, and he's from K&S Freighters. And I thought Mark was coming live from a cab, but it looks like there he's actually in a room. So that's good. Thanks, Mark. We've also got John McDonald, the National Safety Manager from Linfox. He covers all things intermodal. And we've got Darren McKenzie, the Head of Network Optimization in Network Operations from Australia Post. So the topic today is never waste a crisis. So we understand that from the sort of post-COVID world, disruptors can have a legacy that can actually create a benefit. So we're going to explore and unpack today the impacts on the industry of the combination of unexpected and extreme events can have. We're going to sort of look beneath some of the headlines. We're going to look at how workers and organisations and the industry respond to crises and disruption. And what are some of the lessons learned? What worked? What didn't? What would they do differently next time with the benefit of hindsight? And how, we're looking at how can we maintain adaptability and change in the face of disruption. So I'd like to, we have routine run-of-the-mill events sort of versus the more extreme scenarios. So I think the industry itself, transport, warehouse and logistics, have developed systems to operate in defined conditions with known criteria such as capability, capacity, frequency and timeliness. Yet there has to be a level of tolerance built in to the infrastructure and operations so it can handle disruptions, such as those recurring incidents when we're looking at accidents and breakdowns. And organisations are accustomed to mitigating these types of events. However, on occasion, a disruption takes place on a much larger scale. And these may be rarer events, but they have far-reaching consequences across the business continuity and the welfare of personnel, both physically and psychologically. So before we go into the panel, let's have a look at some of the recent high-profile examples of events that have caused major disruption to the industry. So I'm looking at the slide there. So we've got I'll look underneath a couple of these, just a bit more detail. We've got the WA cyclone from April 21. So there was significant fallen trees and debris all over the road. A quote from the headline was Mount Magnet, Meekatharra and Kew are reportedly all full of trucks and almost all out of bread, milk and ready-to-go food. Phone service is very limited in Mount Magnet, apparently, and the power is uncertain. So if we think of that situation, we see that as a headline, but today we want to unpack a bit and think about the people involved, from the driver right up through to the people who are having to manage and reschedule the work and deliveries. We've also got the carnage there from the freight train derailment in Victoria. So that was the track along the Hamilton Highway outside of Geelong late last year. This closed the rail corridor between Melbourne and Adelaide. So Darren from Australia Post will be able to share some insights into this disruption to BAU that this caused. He was coordinating moving products from Victoria to WA via the line haul. So in context to getting beer across to our friends in the West, I think Darren would definitely be considered a critical worker in that scenario. We've also got there just the SA floods, and that's a bit closer to home for me. So the road was submerged about 600 kilometres north of Adelaide. And again, from that article, it's quoting that a freight company delivering perishable groceries to the NT supermarkets had to do a 3,000 kilometre detour through New South Wales and Queensland. And obviously that cost will be put onto customers. And then we've got to also think about the road permits and whether triples are allowed through certain roads in certain states. And if you're thinking about, I don't know if this is an accurate figure, but sort of 1.25 kilometres per litre of fuel, that is a lot of dollars. So transportation is considered critical infrastructure, and disruption can significantly impact the economic and social well-being of the region or the nation. An effective way to see how critical it is to consider the impacts if its removal, what its removal would have on the flow of activities and services. These recent events are examples of that. We're not just going to narrow our focus, today on big ticket items. We can also think of some more predictable or more sort of routine changes or disruptions, such as vehicle collisions, accidents, breakdowns, medical episodes, cyber attacks, and IT failure. But also, before we get into the questions, just note that in the audience, it's not just the trucking industry involved here. I think it was acknowledged earlier by Justin. There's diverse roles and backgrounds participating, whether they be unrelated businesses that have a vehicle fleet, or individuals that are interested in any tips to maintain business continuity during periods of change. There's people from academic and research backgrounds, and there's also regulator presentation. So please contribute in the chat and comment if you've got anything resonates with you, or if you have anything to add about the content. It really is all about the sharing. So I've got a couple of questions, but again, I encourage you to post and engage in the chat. Okay, so let's break the ice with the panel and get this truck out on the road. Channeling a bit of Bev there, I'm afraid. So firstly, we'll go to John, and I'll put this question to all of you. But please tell us a bit about yourself, your role, and what it involves. Afternoon, John.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Look, I'm probably a bit of a transport tragic. I've been in the industry for over 35 years, which I don't really, hard to admit, but I've done everything from being a dockhand to managing some of the large businesses in many of the sort of large transport companies. And I guess about 10 years ago, I transferred into the safety sphere, the dark arts, if you like. And I've been doing that ever since, and I found a really good spot there. So my role is to just, manage the safety processes within the Intermodal organisation. Intermodal is the line haul business within the Linfox group. So anything road transport or rail transport, predominantly full loads, but some part loads. So yeah, that's about where I am. I was going to say that I am a Port Adelaide supporter and feel sorry for Simon, but I know that he's left the chat because Essendon didn't quite get there last week. But anyway, we'll let that one slide.
Oh, you're continuing the football theme there. So where are you based, John? Is that a silly question, noting your team?
Yeah, so based in West Melbourne, but get to travel around the country and see our operations and our people. So it is a role that is pretty mobile.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about disruptions later, but before we get there, what does a typical day when things are going well look like for you?
Well, if things are going well, the trains are running, Demand does not outstrip supply. Our internal systems are going well, and that's pretty much it. So if those things are in place, then we've got a pretty slick operation and good people in the business to get things done. So, but those things have to go right.
Thanks, John. And Darren, tell us a bit about yourself and your role and what that involves.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tom. I guess it's a relatively new role for Australia Post, and one for me as well. I only came into the role in October. Before that, I was responsible for effectively building the new infrastructure and automation for Australia Post, a lot of the major parcel facilities that we've got around the country, and fitting that into our network. So that was kind of a role I was in for the previous 5 years. Before that, a completely different background. Again, I'm ex-military, so I came across from the UK. I was a fighter pilot in the UK for the RAF for nearly 18 years, so I did that for quite a long time. And kind of had a lot to do with risk and obviously management of that risk in that role as well before I came across. So quite a diverse background, not in the industry for 35 years, like John, but a bit more, I guess, diverse in where I've come from. So my role within Australia Post sits across a number of facets, really, one of which is the line haul element that we work with John's team at Intermodal Linfox, amongst others. And another area is trying to be or responsible for harmonizing and optimizing all of our parcel processing machines across the country. We've got a team that look after that. Now, I've also got elements of network safety and look after telematics for electric vehicles, amongst other things within my role. And I also used to look after chain of responsibility for the whole of Post as well. So quite a diverse background. And obviously one of the key elements of that was looking after the line haul and chain of responsibility, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. I think we could also have a whole nother session on how you go from being a fighter pilot to what you're doing now. And but that said, please don't and goes to all the panel. If there's previous roles you've had where you think there can be some lessons learned and examples given, yeah, please don't hesitate to incorporate that this afternoon. So yeah, good afternoon, Mark. Tell us a bit about yourself, your role, and what that involves, and what a normal day and week would look like.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Tom. Yeah, mate, same thing as John. I've been in the industry for probably just over 25 years myself. Worked my way up from being a forklift driver through to being a bit of a dockhand and picking orders for your Woolworths and so forth. And then had actually a trip over to the UK and saw all these little lorries, as they call them over there, Darren, I think it is. And I thought, yes, an unreal thing to do. And I came back and put my hand into starting off in a rigid, working my way up through into your B doubles, and mate, here I am working for being biased, mate, but probably one of the best companies I've worked for in K&S Freighters. And now basically my role is to run anywhere through Australia, but mainly from Adelaide up and down the east coast of Australia, delivering goods from your wines, your bricks, building materials. Yeah, so that's basically what I do. Yeah, and also I'm on a driver committee, to give the drivers a bit of a voice that didn't have a voice prior in South Australia, and yeah.
Thanks, Mark. And I think with that, in that role, in that driver committee role, really encourage you that, to maybe not just talk to yourself, but some anecdotes and experiences you've got from the colleagues that you hear about when you're representing them. But what does a week look like for you? Is it a 5-day week? What, do you have a set number of hours you have to do, or do you roll over to weekends?
Look, my set role is to a full-time run. I'll go from Adelaide over to Melbourne, up into Brisbane and into Gympie, and then and back into Adelaide. Now that takes me, just on 5 days, but some circumstances, depending on the day or week, what I've ran into, it can go into 6 days. But at the moment, there's a bit of freight that's quiet at the moment, obviously with the building industry not quite sure what's going on with it. So we've it's actually affected us in a way of drivers happen to fill in other little spots here and there and to help out. So currently I'm just running Melbourne, Adelaide at the moment, as much as I don't like it, but we just got to fill in a hole to keep everything going. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. And I think Simon spoke earlier about remote and isolated work, and we might touch on that as we talk more. But certainly, you know, that's a big trip, Adelaide up to Gympie and back in 5 days, and you know, presumably you're on your own there. So yeah, really keen to hear some of the challenges of that.
Yeah.
Look, so it's evident we've got a diverse panel here of different roles and responsibilities in the industries, and would be facing different pressures and looking at things through different lenses. So we now look at where the panel can provide some examples of the types of events that have disrupted their businesses and no doubt their personal lives as well, and that of their colleagues. So we'll start off with you, Darren, if that's okay. Tell us about any unexpected challenges or crises that you've faced in the industry and other, and you know, you can consider talking about one major event or examples of a collection of lower level events, and you know, describe how these challenges disrupted the operations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tom. And I think you know, I think the context of this, you've already set it at the start. The biggest event for me, certainly in this role in the 6 months, has been the floods and derailments, you know, back at the end of October, November of last year. And, you know, to set context to it, I'd only been in this role probably about 10 days when the first announcement of the floods up north had started to happen, which at the time, you know, didn't seem like a big event. Because, you know, I asked around the business and sought some advice on where we're at and made sure we had some short-term contingency plans in place. And everyone said, oh yeah, it does this every year. You know, it always floods every year, or there's always something that turns the rail off every year. And I thought, oh, okay, right, you know, have we got a contingency plan in place? Yes, we have. We've got this, blah, blah, blah. And Linfox were there. Yeah, we've got some extra trucks. We'll do this day one. And then I think it got to, you know, 2 weeks in, and the volumes are growing. We're getting towards that part of the year. Floods hadn't subsided. Now we're starting to say, well, what's happening here? You know, you told me these floods you know, come and go for a few days every year, and then it was 2 weeks in, and then we started to get more and more information from ARTC, but it wasn't always going internally to the right places, and trying to manage the communications internally when we didn't really know what was going to happen and when Wirral was going to reopen, I guess, was one of our biggest challenges. So I guess it started off with the floods, and then of course the derailment went on top of that. So we were pretty much right on a limit and partially struggling to meet demand before the derailment. Then the derailment happened straight after that, and then all bets were off. So we were at the point where you know, we're impacting customers. We're trying to move 250,000 parcels a day. The parcels are now backing up. We can't get enough trucks from anywhere. You know, we had the Linfox team that were working all hours a day trying to find us. We had, you know, 4 or 5 other subbies that worked for us all hours trying to find trucks, couldn't get them. They either weren't available or they were already booked up with other companies, and just trying to meet that demand became a real challenge for us. So there's a couple of things that came out from that. One is obviously the fragility of the actual transportation system. I guess east to west in Australia is very reliant on that single source of failure, which is the rail. And when the rail goes down for protracted periods, doesn't matter where it is, then that long-term impact of I guess transport, you know, will be looked at, I'm sure, by lots of companies, but also on a strategic scale. So we had kind of the ripples of that kicking off, and then the volume started to back up. Our service levels into West Australia really plummeted, and everyone was coming to me for answers which I didn't have. But also the internal, because of the size of Australia Post, it's a big behemoth of an organisation. So trying to get to the right people, get the right comms to the right place, whether that's the customer team, whether that's the service team, whether that's the operations teams, the line haul teams, there is so many people all wanting information at different levels. And where we ended up initially was quite on the back foot with how that internal comms was working and where the single source was, until we actually used one of we do have an emergency forum inside Post, but it had never kind of been properly used. It was a new format. So we basically stood that up, and I became the source of truth straight to the executive team and also to the comms team, to the media team, to the customer team, to just try and have a single source of information so that we didn't have one set of information going to customers and one set going to to the comms teams, etc. And that was a real challenge because I didn't, half the time I didn't know what to tell them because I had no information. So sometimes it was just, stand down. But what really came out of that was our big customers, large customers that lodge a lot of product with us, were obviously getting rightly so very, I won't say upset, but we're hunting for information and couldn't understand what was going on and why a little flood or a derailment was impacting something so big as Australia Post. And what are you doing about it? When are you going to reopen the railway line like it was our, like we could do that or we had control of that? And I guess that's also one of the challenges at that strategic level is trying to manage expectation at the customer level. So there's a few little insights there.
Yeah, exactly. And, pun intended, perfect storm, and just before Christmas as well.
Yeah, so, just when our volumes are crazy. Yeah.
And how did that that must have been a fair bit of pressure on yourself as well, and the hours I would imagine you were working, being new to the role.
Yeah, it was okay. I just slept in the tent at work. It was fine. So no, just kidding. It was long hours, but everybody was doing long hours. To be honest, as a business, we tend to, that's our peak time running into November, and the cyber sales, it's all hands on deck anyway that time of year. But it was added stress. It added a number of stress points for a number of reasons, some of which I couldn't control. Things like the cost point. So if you imagine, we send X number of rail units to WA a day, and when you take those off, you need to replace those with B doubles, some of which aren't available. Now, the problem is that everybody else in the country also wants that same B double because the rail's gone down, so they've stolen it. Or what it becomes then is a bit of a seller's market, and the costs and the supply of demand went through the roof. And we got to the point where it was, it was between $30,000 and $40,000 for a round trip for a B double to go from Victoria to WA instead of the usual, somewhere between 13 and 17 or 18 grand. So prices doubled, nearly tripled in some instances, which added additional pressures because all of a sudden it started to hit the bottom line. And everyone said, well, how long is this going to carry on? I don't know. What's your daily chance? We don't know. We're just grabbing any truck we can get. It was like trying to meet demand. It was coming in quicker than we could deal with the size of the team we had. So lots of challenges, but just trying to do the right thing for the customers in the end, and obviously the community first of all, and then worry about the costs later. But it added a lot of challenge.
Thank you. Good insights there. So we'll look a little bit later in the following question, Darren. Maybe we'll unpack a bit about that. Getting on contractors on board and getting the supply and demand aspect of the assets. But Mark, could you tell us about any unexpected challenges or crises that you've had to face? And I'm sure there's been a few.
Yeah, Tom, actually there has been quite a few, especially over the recent years. But I was actually just getting my thoughts together then, because Darren brought up a good point of trying to get things through to certain customers, especially over west. And it was probably one that really stuck in my mind, and it was those floods from Queensland to where I run out the back. So I load up a Gympie over night time, and I run out the back into Kingaroy and Dalby, and then I would come down into Gundawindi. But with these floods that were happening, I'd actually gotten down to Mooney, and the signs out there, because it's a big floodplain area out there, the signs have actually gone, basically closed, when I've come out of the shower at Mooney to say, hey, there's no access. So really my only option was to ring my national manager now, which is Xavier, and ask, hey, so what can I actually do here? Look, I've got a couple of options, go back to Dalby, get fuel, come back past to where I was and basically start making my way back down to an area to where I knew where an Ampol was, to really keep me on track. So basically, so that was one thing, that we worked out. So I'd actually gone out and filled up out of my own pocket, got reimbursed, and that was just a crisis that we could avoid to keep us moving without doubling back. Just to keep the freight moving to get to the next customer. and talking about your isolation, being out there, not knowing exactly what the roads are like. Yeah, it's a bit daunting of your isolation of where do I stop? What happens if I've got no service? Little things like that all comes into play, and when you actually tell your wife, "Hey, I'm going out to an area that I don't know. Please check up on me in an hour or 2 hours, or just to make sure that I'm still going." Which was quite good, and everybody actually did that because it was a route that we don't take at all. So I ended up going out to a town called St George, which is out on the border of Queensland, central Queensland there. And yeah, so when I finally got out there and everybody checked up on me and said, "Is everything all good?" So that's basically one crisis that I can think of at the top of my head that we're actually able to avoid pretty good and get around it as a team. Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks, Mark. And obviously, you rang your supervisor. You're able to put your hand in your pocket to get out of the problem then as well. But what about you? You mentioned your wife. What about staying connected with families? Like we said, there's been examples where power's down. There's probably lack of phone coverage. But how do you stay connected to your family and to other drivers?
Yeah. Obviously, as a truck driver, mate, people think we just sit up in a cab all day and just sit there and look pretty, steering a steering wheel and driving down the road. But we're actually constantly on the phones all day, just checking up on each other and each other's welfare. How our day was. With my family or my wife, I don't have any kids. She works full time, so basically, she'll call me at 7 o'clock in the morning and about 5:15 of an afternoon. But any other time during the day, if something irregular comes up, she'll check up on me, once or twice a day just to see how things are going. Yeah. The only reason why, really, when we're out in a remote area, if it's an area that we don't know, it's good to have that team to really say, "Hey, you're traveling along all right," to where when we do our normal routes, we get to know the actual people. You might stop at a service station, you might stop at a truck stop, and there could be a house across the road, and you talk to people, and they actually get to know you. So that's one way of people, finding out where you are as well. So.
Thanks, Mark. So there's a camaraderie across the drivers. Yeah.
By all means, not just the drivers, but it's also within management too. Management say, "Hey, mate, you haven't moved for a while. Is everything all right?" Which is good. Yeah.
So staying connected. Thanks for that. And John, which is tell us about a challenge or a disruption that you've had to face, and yeah.
Yeah, sure, Tom. And I want to share a story about this is a flood story. Like, we've all got plenty of flood stories over the last 12 months, but this is a specific one where the town of Kununurra, up the top of Western Australia, was cut up by floodwaters just late February. And they got to a point where the supermarket shelves didn't have food on them, and there was a real community need there that needed to be looked at, and the road was closed off. The government had closed the road off, and I guess got to a point where something had to happen. We're a supplier to a large supermarket chain, and so Kununurra is generally serviced out of Katherine in the Northern Territory. So that's where the road was blocked between Katherine and Kununurra. So look, our normal stance is you never drive through floodwaters, right? We'll find a way. We find a way around it, whatever we need to do. In this case, that wasn't the case. You couldn't do that. I mean, they were flying some supplies in, but that was only limited. They can only do so much of that. So we looked at what was there, and there had been other vehicles pass. Look at in that area. They said the water was only at a certain limit. So look, our customers are obviously reacting to their demand. Government also out there, trying to push that suppliers get through, which was, interesting because they were the ones closing the roads off. But look, when that sort of pressure comes on, it just rolls down the hill. So from government to the supplier to the transport operator, and then of course the driver is the one at the very pointy end that has to actually do what they need to do. So look, I got this call and from one of my managers, and look, they're all, well, what do we do here? Because this is not what we do. The rules are you don't go through floodwaters. And I said, well, okay, we need to look at the community factor of this, that, the food needs to get through. And it's really just about going back to your basics, right? I mean, okay, can we do this without putting anyone's life at risk? Because the fact is, a lot of times you can go through floodwaters. What you've got is you've got some potential risk to the equipment and those sort of things, but not necessarily to the driver. And if there are some risks, can we mitigate those? So just going through, safety 101. What are the hazards? What controls can we put in place? And is that going to be enough to make sure that no one's at any serious risk? So we did that. We came up with a bunch of controls. It's about making sure that we were all over the weather situation and knowing what was coming down. We had to make sure that we monitored the Northern Territory and WA government websites, because they were keeping us updated on what was happening at the sites. We consulted. We went to the trouble of consulting our fleet team about, well, this is the level of water we expect to go through. Is that going to be okay for the trucks? So they gave us some advice there. We made sure that the driver had a sat phone, so no question of whether there's going to be some communication. We made sure that was going to be there. We knew that when that truck came back, we were going to get it straight into the workshop for it to be inspected, so that we haven't got any axle problems that were going to cause a problem down the track. But then we made things very clear for the driver. Right? We did not expect them to pass through floodwaters in excess of what we'd already discussed. We set a limit. We said that's what it is. If you think it's going on higher than that, you don't have to go through them. We talked about not moving through rapidly moving water. So still water is fine. Rapidly moving is no good. We made sure that only where you could see that there was that the water was at an acceptable level, and we didn't let the operation happen at night. So because in night it's almost impossible to work out what your floodwaters are. So this all had to happen during the day, and of course we set up accommodation at the other end in case that you got through, you can't get back, and there was that option there. So there was no pressure to get through and then try and get back to home base. We had food and water supplies. So if the driver had to stop, well, you know what, he could stop in his cab for a couple of days and be okay. We made sure that the truck was fully fueled, so that you didn't have to rely on stopping, and we just made sure that everyone was aware they could stop the operation whenever they needed to and abort. So and of course we had to go through a permit process with the government or to get through the permit to get a permit to go through the closed road as well. So it got to the point where we went through all this, and we've almost got a blueprint for doing it sometime in the future. And we've almost talked about having a cheat sheet going through that process, so that we can whip that out and go, this is what we've done. This is the way to do it. It did go ahead. It worked out. There was certainly some lessons to learn. And one of the big things is that if you do get to a point where the flood's too much, there's not a lot you can do except wait for them to go down, because you can't turn around up there. You know, you've got a big, in this case, with a B double, but sometimes you've got a road train. You can't turn around on the road, particularly if it's flooded. Might be water over the road. You can drive on the bitumen, but you get off that into the dirt, and you're not getting back out again. So, you know, there would have had to be some things that, probably some rescue that we would have had to sort of taken place, which might have meant leaving the load behind and driving the prime mover out, and those sort of things. So there's some of those sort of things. Sometimes the water indicators were washed away, you know. So then, you know, what do? You sort of, it gets a bit hairy sometimes. You know, there was damage to the truck. Of course, we didn't go through any big flood waters. You know, we got lights damage, and, you know, there was a lot of money in, you know, pulling apart the axles and inspecting them and making sure that they weren't, you know, compromised in any way. There's a lot of other costs for accommodation and those sort of things, making sure that you've got supplies, etc. Just little things like that. And there were 2 different state governments to deal with as well. So, you know, this is where, you know, an operator's going through they've got their usual busy day, and suddenly they're faced with an organisation of something which is right out of the normal. So this takes a lot of time to organise, you know, going back and forward between customers and government and setting it up, but then having it ready and not being able to go out yet because you've got to get this through, and then having to get it through. So there's a lot of planning and all that sort of stuff. It's not just, hey, look, you know, there's a load, get it out to Kununurra and we're all going to be good. So, you know, there's a real stress point for those operators. So yeah, that was about it. That's a lot of learning out of that, but it's learning that we can take forward and use. And look, in the end, it's you know, people at the other end were relying on that for food and supplies. So you know, the people involved. It's amazing how resilient people can be when they feel like they are making a difference in this, you know, in this. In the environment where there's an emergency, and you know, just the respect I have for those people that are, you know, the guys that were behind the wheel actually going through there must have been fairly hairy at different times. And although you do everything you can to back them up and stay in contact with them, I can imagine that, you know, like you were saying, Mark, you're probably going through going, geez, I'm not quite sure how this is going to work out, but I'm going to get through. I'm doing my best to get through it and see how we go. So that was just one example of a situation that that came up and how we got through it.
Thanks, John. And there's a number of things you said in there that, you know, and they could even be topics for another day, but the permits and, you know, the emergency access notices, etc. in times like this, you know, certain trucks can't go on certain roads without approvals from state and territory regulators, etc. So, you know, there's something else for people who aren't really fully aware of the industry to think about. But you also spoke about empowering the driver, and when we look at work demands and, you know, the psychosocial risk of unrealistic time pressures, you know, there's a change in the work as well. So really, these are factors that the driver and you know, the people supporting them have to deal with. And also, what I note you know, about what does the driver carry? And we maybe talk to Mark in a second, but do you equip your drivers with, you know, there's water in the cab, there's non-perishable food, just in case you're going to get stranded just before you're about to have that meal, etc. You know, we're talking here about different types of floods, and I think the last 3 years, floods, fires, the pandemic, derailments, has shown that really it's not unexpected anymore. We've got to expect it. So learning from these examples is great. And certainly a number of stress points there for the business, John. Thank you. So we did make a note that, you know, these catastrophes, there's been no playbook, I presume, and you've learned a lot, you said, John, but, you know, there's always a random aspect to them. The devastation rarely happens the way that, you know, we think it's going to play out. So it isn't really possible to keep track of everything and anticipate how they will combine and impact the business. But like I said, we will move on to sort of lessons learned. So really, now for the panel can talk about how business operations were maintained in these sort of change environments. So Mark, going to you first, how did business operation and staff welfare managed in the midst of crisis? the one you discussed, or others as well? You know, so we're looking at an overall business, keeping the truck on the road, through to the personal level for you and your colleagues and the teams.
Yeah, look, mate, I don't really get too much involved within the office side of things, so I don't know how they go about it. But I listen to John and Darren; they have a team around them of everybody sorting things out. Where I just really just get given the, hey, mate, you can do this kind of stuff. This is what we probably recommend that you do. Yeah. So other than that, sometimes we're just that remote. You know, we travel over night time most of the time, so we don't have that access to be able to talk to management all the time. So sometimes, unfortunately, we just have to make a plan of attack, I guess you could say, and say, hey, would this, by going by what or how you know management, is this going to be acceptable, what I'm going to do, or should I just sit still and wait for the next day? Yeah, so most of the time we do come up with a bit of a plan, and 9 times out of 10, that plan is something that I did actually think about, or other drivers have thought about. So
how do you you've got the long days and you're away for 5 days, Mark, but if that turns into 7 or 8, you know, how do you manage that? Or does that it must be a certain level of resilience and flexibility amongst yourself and your colleagues, you know, with an expectation that you could.
Bonus for me, mate, being away for an extra day, away for the family, but don't take that to heart, people.
Don't tell the boss.
Look, it is hard, definitely. Obviously, having the advantage of having a permanent run, you can kind of, I guess you could say, you could actually lead a life outside of work and be able to, I'm not sure the word I'm looking for here, but be able to organise your life, go and do things like a barbecue, or in this state of South Australia, go to the Barossa, to the wineries, and do all these little tiny things that unfortunately a lot of other truck drivers don't get to do. You know what? Sometimes I've been stuck where I've had to go over to Western Australia or little places like that, and you've just got to cop it on the chin, knowing that you should be turning around straight away, but unfortunately you might have a 24-hour break on the road or something like that. Yeah, you just got to maintain that contact with family as hard as it is.
And look, there are some initiatives I'm aware of that are I know the National Road Safety Partnership Program are looking. They're launching an initiative. I think it's at the Brisbane Truck Show. It's to more recognition for truck drivers and people in the transport industry, and particularly the humanising. I think it's called humanising the truck driver. There's somebody in that truck. There's somebody who's got who's delivering goods, who's got a life, who's got a family, who's a professional driver. So when you're in your car or when you're engaging with them, please do so with courtesy and respect. And I think that's really trying to raise the profile of people in your industry and people in your position, because you're already explaining there some of the challenges in the role, and they're certainly not small. So.
No, and as everybody sees, everybody gets frustrated with a big slow truck sitting at 100 k's an hour in front of you, as a car driver. But unfortunately, as you said, Tom, we're there doing a job to actually put food or put clothes on your back, and they don't see what we have to go around and what we actually give up. Whether that be giving up your nieces or your sons or your daughter's birthdays, or in my case my wife's, or so all those kind of things come into a factor that people just don't realise, that we're giving up life to make their life better. And probably something that that I could touch on from that kind of thing, and it probably comes to lack of us. We do 14-hour shifts. All right, like that's your working time. After that shift, we've got to look for somewhere to pull up, and of late it's getting worse and worse to where you pull up and there's actually nowhere to park these days anymore, because some of these vehicles are actually too big or cars I'm talking about, too big to actually go and park in a car park, and they're taking up the parking area, and we're not getting places to go to sleep, and it's actually interrupting our time, and it really starts to annoy us in a way.
Yeah. I think infrastructure, rest areas, facilities, when we look more broadly at recruitment and retention in the industry, I understand these are the things that, you know, as you flagged, are important, you know, and are likely to keep people in the industry and particularly keep them healthy, you know, mentally.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Mark. So Darren, for you, can you tell us how the business in that scenario you talked about, or others, how business operations and business operations continues and staff welfare is managed in the midst of such disruption?
Yeah, absolutely. To answer the first part, the business operations, I think there was a number of contingency plans that were put in place very quickly. If you can imagine, you know, we're only moving 60% of our West Australia products every day. So if we're going to move, you know, 200,000 parcels, then you can say, you know, there's 80,000 parcels backing up in Melbourne every day on top of the ones that should have already left. So day by day by day, it was building up and building up. So we had to stand up a couple of additional sites in Melbourne. The Linfox team really helped us out as well by standing up a site and helping us to move loose load parcels from West Melbourne. We also had to stand up sites in South Australia just so we could move some product straight from New South Wales to South Australia, almost store it there until we could get it onto a truck and get a truck available, or get some rail when the rail eventually became available from there. We basically moved our whole network south and based it between Melbourne and SA, and tried to just, you know, remove that whole linkage. So we had to put a lot of plans in place. We did get there. It wasn't pretty. Transit times were far longer than we would hoped. But I think in the whole, I think the public understood where we were at with it, and as did the customers. So we made the best of a bad situation. In terms of looking at the people, absolutely. I mean, I think they love a crisis. I think in Post we actually come together quite well when things like this happen and pull together across the nation in different areas. And I think certainly where I was at the time was dealing with the line haul side of things. There was other parts of the business had no idea what was going on. You know, they were all going business as usual, yet there were certain areas that were running around heads on fire, trying to solve a big problem. I think just trying to make sure, obviously from my perspective, making sure that the line haul manager was, you know, well rested. He also wasn't very well at the time either, so I had to look after his mental and physical well-being at the same time because he was going through some stuff. So can't just lump all the pressure, you know, there. I've got to shoulder that. That's my responsibility to do. So I tried to relieve him as much of that as I could, and all the way down the chain, to be honest, to the point where I would just try and avoid all irrelevant communications going into my team, that it all came through me at the top end as a filter, just so that they could actually focus and avoid all of the noise outside of their day-to-day job, just so they could try and manage. And in the whole, they did very well. And there was a couple of times where people just needed a day off, like outside of, you know, planned or annual leave or whatever. Sometimes it was just, you could see, and it was, you know, you just need to have a day off, like otherwise you're going to burn out. So, you know, making sure we all check in with each other, looking after the team through up the whole level, all the chain, and above me as well. So it was a bit of a difficult time for sure. But Post has also got a number of really good mental health programs internally, and we've got an employee assistance program as well, which I know some of the team reached out to just for some extra support over and above speaking to line management and direct management, if you want that independent person to talk to as well. So I think that was used too.
Yeah, oh, that's good to hear. And just, you talked about reaching out to Linfox. Was that a commercial relationship already in place, or was that something? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was. We've got a huge contract with Linfox in various parts of the country in the intermodal division, as well as others, but the bulk of our work is done through Linfox, and yeah, they were great. They bent over backwards to try and support us, or they did support us throughout that time. And again, you know, they were trying to source a lot of the B doubles and the trucks and you know, that supply for us. We just physically couldn't get them quick enough as they were coming. As soon as they were coming in and offered, it was being accepted. And of course, we're trying to look after StarTrack as well, because that's part of Australia Post, fundamental part of our business, and the Road Express business. moves different products. I mean, that's a pallet business that needs drop decks and different trailers, and we're using standard taut liners and Pantex and skells and boxes as well from the post side. So we had to make sure we had the right truck that was being offered to the right location at the right time. And it was almost, at one point, it was almost irrelevant of price because we just needed to move volume. We just couldn't move it quick enough. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Darren.
So, hey, sorry.
Mark.
So Darren, just going back on, you're saying that you couldn't find extra freight handlers and that. How do you go about that now? Do you have like spare trailers or anything hanging around now to where maybe, some of your drivers could come in, then they might have only done a 10-hour shift. So say, for instance, Adelaide, Melbourne's an 8.5-hour trip. You've had guys come and say, all of a sudden, they, might have 4 hours left on their book for the day. There's a trailer there that they potentially hook up to that's loaded and go back at least halfway. Do you guys have things like that in place? That's what we're trying to look at doing.
Yeah, we looked at a few different options, Mark, to be honest. And I think one of the challenges with this particular event was because the market all, dare I say it, wanted to get on the WA bandwagon because, of course, rightly so, it was a more lucrative time. To do a run to WA and back was a lot more, beneficial to drivers and companies than doing a couple of East Coast runs. But the problem we actually found was instead of putting our drivers on the WA, so we actually found that we could get contracts for the WA legs, but we started to struggle on the East Coast. We couldn't even get the supply between Melbourne and Sydney because a lot of the companies were going the other way. They were, chasing the dream. Which actually left us really short at various times, including our biggest week, Cyber Week, this week. We were last year that we were quite short because of that. Now, that meant that effectively we had to just keep our corporate drivers that we already have drivers that do Melbourne, Adelaide, and Melbourne, Sydney to supplement obviously the contract volume. We had to keep them where they were. Otherwise, if we'd have taken them off the East Coast as well, we'd have left ourselves even shorter running up between Melbourne and Sydney. So they were the stalwarts running up that east side for us.
Yeah. No,
but yeah, it's a great question. And how do you solve it? I don't know. And it was I guess the short notice nature of it as well.
And that's the big issue with it. It's everyone's looking for the solution.
Correct.
The groceries, the post, the parcels, where every other commodity is trying to look for the same solution, and it's in the end those that are going to be willing to pay for it. But there would have been a lot of stuff left on the floor.
Yeah, and we had big companies that were that don't even have a contract with us to even process their parcels, just ringing us out of the blue saying, "Any chance we can steal one of your trucks?" We said, "Absolutely not. We can't even move our own volume. Thanks very much." But it was getting desperate. Really senior people in big companies were just ringing around. Any chance? We just need a truck. We just need a truck. No, can't get you one. Sorry, just not enough.
Yeah.
And I don't see that problem going away anytime soon. I mean, we're finding it a struggle to recruit drivers. I'm not sure. I think there's a national shortage of skilled drivers and professionals to come in, and I think there's a lot of companies facing the same problem, trying to recruit not only the drivers but trying to get the equipment as well. Equipment to buy is on like an 18-month lead time at the moment because of supply chain globally. We tried to bolster our fleet, but it's just taking an age to get the equipment in. I know Linfox are doing the same thing, as is everybody trying to bolster up, knowing how short we got last year, so that we're not in the same problem again. But it's a real challenge.
Yeah. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks, gents. And I'm mindful of time. We'll go on to some lessons learned in a minute. But John, for you touched on that scenario at the Pilbara, but have you got any sort of experiences to share around how business operations are maintained and staff welfare managed in the midst of a crisis?
Well, I share a story where actually in one role that I had, we had a crisis management consultant come in, and the crisis management consultant started going through processes about, well, what if this happened, what if that happened, and the answer was always, well, that happened last week, and that happened 3 weeks ago, and he kept going through the list. And what he worked out is that the transport industry is actually one big crisis every day. that's pretty much what we do. Look, you know, I think it comes back to earlier. I've heard a bit about reward and recognition, and we do like to call things out when things are done and they're done really well. They are called out around the business, and you've got to keep that circle going back and letting people know they've done things. You know, if people think they're doing things for a reason, I think they're better able to cope because they can feel the purpose. In fact, Mick, I know he's listening today, he shared a story with me about how he got into the industry because he saw his father being part of, you know, some bushfire crisis management, and how that sort of helped people in their time of need, and that's what got him into driving, and because he had a driving career before he sort of you know, came over to join the safety team. So you know, that's what got him there, and I think it's that sense of purpose that you have that gets you through. I think, and I think for the operators, if they know that they're achieving something, that gives them that, I guess, that adrenaline to keep moving through. And obviously, at the end of it, you've got to make sure that you are taking care of people and allowing them to go and take some time off, even if it's only an early day or a late morning or whatever it might be. So, and there's been a lot of that in the business over the last year. Sometimes you think, well, you've just got over one wave and the next one comes crashing down on you, but you just have to sort of stand up and repeat that process to make sure people know that, hey, this is for a reason. This is not about, you know, we're just doing this and you know, ungratefully moving to the next thing. You need to stop and pause and reward people. Sometimes that is part of a formal reward and recognition process we've got, if it's some individual effort, and other times it's just about everyone just going, you know, look, guys, we've achieved this, and this is what we do here, and this is why we do it, and I think that gets people through.
Thanks, John. And you know that I think you see it on the back of trucks when trucks stop, Australia stops. You know, that sort of resonates. And looking more strategically for some of this Darren said about the actual trucks themselves not being, you know, not being available for 18 months, and the increase in goods that need dispersing, and then the recruitment issue as well. There really is some stresses in the industry, and you know, it's not just about trucks and trailers and the goods. It is about the people involved. So I think even a takeaway for today is about that recognizing recognizing the professionals involved, and like you said, John, reward and recognition is an important part of that. Look, we'll go to now. I'd really be interested to hear from all of you around, you know, the benefit of hindsight, and please, if there's anything in the chat, any questions you'd like to ask or points to flag, what are the lessons learned from these sorts of crises, and how can you better be prepared? What have you learned? What have you changed in your systems? Do you have a spare capacity? Do you have an emergency management team? Is your business continuity plan had to be revised? As you mentioned, Darren, there was an officer, you know, a reasonably new procedure that hadn't been looked at. So, you know, you certainly in the last couple of years had chance to test your systems and your processes. So, just really interested in some of your insights briefly around what you learned, what went well, and for the audience, you know, what are the key things? How do you empower people, give them autonomy, but sort of also have them understand what the limits are? So I might go to you first, Darren.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tom. I think from our perspective, it was a really good shakeout of our National Emergency Management team, and actually, because it was so new and it was kind of a desktop before we got into it, it was very clunky to start with. So actually the refinement of that, the communications, who owns the communications, when, how, actually, and it doesn't sound like much, but so much time was wasted internally trying to get comms to the right people, or even if there was no comms, trying to tell people there was no comms, and it had to be done all individually. So there was an awful lot of time and inefficiency saved on that. I think in terms of how, you know, the team and wider reacted to it, I think, you know, would I have done anything differently now? The only thing I would potentially have done is, now that I know the potential for longevity of some of these floods, is obviously would make a really early assessment and potentially go ahead and start booking in advance additional capacity, because at the time it took probably two and a bit weeks before we actually understood the severity of the floods that were going on between Parkes and obviously the joins down south. Because for whatever reason, the information coming through just didn't indicate it was severe enough. And that was, you know, working with our major logistics partners as well, until it got too late. So we were almost on the back foot from when it started. And by that stage, either the capacity had been taken up or or it wasn't available for other reasons. So I think I'd be a lot more keen to jump the gun and book in capacity, even if we ended up paying to run either empty or cancelling in advance and waste some money, than I would, you know, having only been a week in the role last time and not having, you know, not knowing.
Yeah.
But overall, I don't think we'd have done much differently, to be honest. It's, you know, in terms of a contingency, it's not something as an organisation we can do to say, well, instead of putting things on the rail, we'll just put everything on a B double forever, because, you know, the cost is prohibitive. You know, it costs you 4 times more to send the same container, or 3 times more on road than it does by rail, and you multiply that for 250,000 parcels. It's not sustainable for us to road move absolutely everything. So I did look at that, actually, whether that's a viable option to not do it, but the reality is you just can't afford to. But yeah, no, some really good stuff came out of it. Some contingency plans, and I think the thrashing out of the communication channels inside was actually one of the biggest ones. Yeah.
So I presume you'd be lobbying the government for a second rail line.
Second
over to
rail
the
line,
west.
absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
amazed we don't have one, but there we go.
Thanks very much, Darren. And John, over to you.
Yeah, look, I think you know, the lessons that we learn is in the solutions that we have found to the problems over the last couple of years. You know, I think about all of the North Queensland floods and how clunky that was when we started you know, reacting to them a couple of years ago, because, you know, yeah, it happened every year, but it wasn't a big issue. It suddenly has become more often and more severe, and you know, 2 years ago would have been a bit clunky. Now it's about making sure that you form your relationships of your contingency plan well before it happens. And because it's been tested a number of times, yes, that is now well in, you know, it's almost like standard practice that the floods happen, the guys just click into flood gear and away it goes. Whereas a couple of years ago it would have been, no, we don't have those relationships in place as well as we should have, and that, you know, there's a bit of catch up to get that going, and you might not end up with the same result. But there's that, you know, there's running the road trains, you know, sort of road bridge style over to Perth, which was an answer when the rail was out getting to Kalgoorlie, and then railing it from there. All those things, once they've been done once, it's easier to set them up again. And even coming down to that example I had earlier about how you get through flood waters, and having a formula to set that up. So I think, you know, I just talk about fitness, you know, and, you know, we've just, everyone, the whole industry is much fitter than what it was a couple of years ago, because of the you know, the issue after issue that we've had. So we are moving ahead and getting fitter as we go. And, you know, maybe we need to build some of that into the system, but certainly there's been a lot of lessons learnt over that time that can be, you know, switched on.
Thanks, John. And Mark, following your involvement in changes and disruption, what have you learned? And I'd be interested from you about what gives you confidence to make decisions in a changing environment. You know, if you could have a message for managers, and that, how can they give drivers at the pointy end you know, empower them to make those decisions? Is it a bit heavy at the end? Is it?
That's probably a question that I probably couldn't answer, because it's a hard one to really answer, but there's probably only one way that I could really think of it as myself. From all the challenges that we've had, not only just from the floods, but from the fires, from COVID, just different ways that we've gone about it was, and probably the one thing that I could probably really think about would be me being in the driver committee kind of side, has given me the confidence to make a decision on, hey, I can do this. So I'm sure that these guys would allow me to do it. So in saying that, it's more like, say, our fuel, and same with Linfox and Australia Post, we've got certain areas that we can only fuel up at. So one thing that I've learned is if you come across a servo, go and fill up. That's probably my biggest one. Or coming back to rest areas, if you're half an hour from your 14 hours or 12 hours in some cases, just pull up. Bring your manager the next day or send him a text, say, mate, hey, I'm going to be half an hour late tomorrow because I know that this is where I can actually pull up, or, you know, this is where that's probably the only things that I could say to managers out there. Just let us do things that we're capable of having in our control. Yeah.
Yeah, that's well said, Mark. And if there was, I mean, as I said in the audience, there'll be regulators, there's healthy trucks and sheds, there's people you know, listening. And so for someone like you, it'd be very valuable to know what would you like to see on the road that you can't get today? And I think you've already alluded to the services of parking and is there anything else?
I would love to see a lot more, and I actually think I saw this question before. The one thing that I would love to see more of is more showers at these rest stops. That, because you get along the East Coast, the only place, well, not even just the East Coast, even up and down through the centre, the only places to get a shower is at a service station. How many people have gone through those service stations that night or that day? So that's probably one thing that I would like to see out there, just to help us. Yeah, it's great to build these roads, and I think I touched on it the other day. Half the country got pushed out of the Hume Highway because of all the floods through the centre of Australia. Hey, that's great. We've got a big brand new road. Look at us. How good are we? But what can we give to the drivers? And the drivers getting nothing. They were sleeping on the side of a road, which is breakdown areas. I think we had quite a few fatalities from that. You know, there's, yes, you know what, we don't expect these things to happen, but maybe we should be looking ahead and trying to think of these things. But yeah, those rest areas should have more showers, and even in areas. So if you went to America, never been there to drive or anything, but it's only stories. A rest area involves actually seating areas, TVs, showers, and all these internet computers all set up. So that's, if we're going to get with things and be like America or be like anybody else in the world, that's probably things that I would look at to help the driver to feel more at home out on the road.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I think that's goes broader as well when you're looking at the recruitment. And, you know, we note sometimes the lack of diversity in the people representing the industry. And, you know, it could be a topic for another day. We want to open this up to more diverse, culturally diverse language, the gender as well. You know, to encourage more female drivers. I know there's been media articles around those things like poor facilities are really something that are keeping a number of people away from the industry. Look, I'm mindful of time, and I can see Bev there. I want to thank Mark, John, and Darren for your insights. There's a whole. This could lead to a whole. Each piece that we've unpacked could lead to another session. And we didn't really want today to be about just admiring the fact that there are crises and we deal with them. I think in context, really what we've done is we're hopefully starting that conversation, as someone said today. If somebody could take away from today that we've started to talk about the psychological impacts that the industry can face generally, and then through periods of change when people's, you know, personal lives are put under pressure as well. I think it's been really valuable for, and I'm selfishly, as somebody who works for a regulator, to see context. And when we talk about what's reasonably practical in an environment, well, you've certainly got change happening, and that's a change environment. So you're making decisions sort of on the fly, but as John said, you know, still stopping and assessing. I think the key thing for us all as well is there's no unexpected events now. They're all to be expected. They're reasonably foreseeable that we're going to get floods, fires, going to be involved in incidents. So how do you get your business and your people crisis fit and resilient? Is there, you know, to start thinking about training and preparing those individuals. Healthy Heads, Lachlan there had some valuable resources to start with if your organisation has not started. So yeah, thank you very much. Unless there's any final thoughts from you gentlemen, I'll sign off.
Fine. No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And I have taken some notes down on what John and Darren have said, and I'm sure I can pass them on.
Excellent.
Thanks,
Excellent.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much, gents. Thanks, Bev.
So look, I'd like to say thanks to Tom, and I'd also like to say thank you to Darren, Mark and John. I've found it a really valuable session, and what came across to me was the commitment, the teamwork and the trust that you need to have in the industry to overcome some of those challenges, particularly with the trust with the drivers. So look, I'd just like to pass a huge thank you to everyone who presented and attended today. It really has been a great event. And if you'd like to stay up to date with all things Transport Network Forum, please subscribe to the mailing list and share with your colleagues. Thank you again for joining us. We've had a great day, and please stay safe and keep on trucking on. Okay, signing out, Bev Smith. Over.